The night sky holds secrets we're only beginning to understand, and on October 20th, 2025, one of those secrets may have revealed itself in the most terrifying way possible. While millions of people across the globe watched their digital lives crumble as Amazon Web Services collapsed, taking with it everything from banking systems to social media platforms, something far more sinister was unfolding in the cosmic darkness above our heads. 3I/Atlas, the mysterious interstellar visitor that has puzzled astronomers since its discovery, chose that exact moment to slip behind our sun, vanishing from every telescope on Earth just as our most critical infrastructure burned to the ground. The timing wasn't just suspicious, it was surgical in its precision. Tonight we're going to examine evidence that suggests this wasn't a coincidence. We're going to trace a pattern of behaviour that points to something far more disturbing than a random chunk of space ice drifting through our solar system. Because what if 3I/Atlas isn't just visiting? What if it's been watching, learning, and waiting for the perfect moment to test our defences? If you're ready to dive deep into this mystery, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Comment below with your location and tell me what you think really happened on October 20th. The evidence begins with timing that defies statistical probability and ends with questions that challenge everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. Part 1. The Perfect Storm. Let me paint you a picture of October 20th, 2025, because the events of that day created a convergence so unlikely that calling it coincidence requires willful blindness to the mathematical impossibility staring us in the face. At 3:11 a.m. Eastern Time, Amazon Web Services began experiencing what they would later describe as elevated error rates in their US East 1 region. Within minutes, the digital backbone of modern civilization started cracking. DNS services collapsed first, making it impossible for computers to translate website addresses into the numerical codes they actually use. Then DynamoDB failed, taking with it the databases that power countless applications. Load balancers crashed next, unable to distribute traffic across server networks that were themselves beginning to fragment. But this wasn't just any server failure. US East 1 isn't simply a data center, it's the beating heart of global internet infrastructure, a digital nexus through which an incomprehensible volume of data flows every second. When it fails, the effects cascade across continents like digital dominoes falling in perfect sequence. Snapchat went dark. Fortnite players found themselves staring at error messages. Ring doorbell cameras stopped recording. Venmo transactions froze mid-payment. Even Amazon's own retail platform showed errors for users trying to make purchases. The outage wasn't confined to a single service or even a single type of service. It was systematic, comprehensive, affecting the fundamental infrastructure that makes modern internet communication possible. Within hours, millions of people worldwide discovered that their digital lives had been effectively severed. Banking applications refused to load. Streaming services displayed connection errors. Cloud-based business systems went offline, leaving companies unable to access their own data. The disruption spread across time zones as people in different regions attempted to connect to services and found nothing but digital silence. Now, isolated infrastructure failures happen. Complex systems break down. But the scale and simultaneity of this particular collapse raised questions that Amazon's technical explanations couldn't fully address. When multiple redundant systems fail at once, when backup protocols don't activate as designed, when one of the most sophisticated technology companies on Earth experiences what they describe as unprecedented technical difficulties, you have to ask whether technical failure tells the complete story. The official timeline speaks of elevated error rates, configuration problems, and cascading system failures, standard language for what the industry calls a major incident. But missing from that timeline is any acknowledgement of what was happening simultaneously in the realm beyond Earth's atmosphere. Because while engineers in Virginia scrambled to restore digital services and millions of users refreshed their browsers in frustration, 3I/Atlas was executing a maneuver that astronomers would later realize had been planned with clockwork precision for months, possibly years. 3I/Atlas entered solar conjunction on October 21st, less than 24 hours after the infrastructure collapse began. Solar conjunction is astronomy's equivalent of a blackout curtain, dropping across the stage at the climactic moment of a performance. From Earth's perspective, the Sun positions itself directly between us and whatever we're trying to observe, making observation impossible, regardless of how advanced our telescopes might be. For any other astronomical object, this would be merely frustrating. For an interstellar visitor displaying the unusual characteristics that 3I/Atlas had shown since its discovery, the timing was nothing short of suspicious. Think about the probabilities involved here. Major AWS outages affecting US East 1 occur perhaps once or twice in any given year. Interstellar objects visit our inner solar system maybe a few times per decade, and that's only counting the ones we actually detect. The odds that these two independent events would align within hours of each other should be astronomically small, measured in percentages so tiny they approach zero. But the conjunction of these events becomes even more remarkable when you consider what 3I/Atlas was approaching during its hidden passage. October the 29th marked the object's perihelion, its closest approach to our Sun at a distance of approximately 1.36 astronomical units. This is the moment when any comet or asteroid experiences maximum solar heating, when volatile materials vaporize most rapidly, when the gravitational and thermal stresses on the object reach their peak. For a natural comet, perihelion represents the most scientifically interesting phase of its journey. Ice sublimates into gas, dust streams away in brilliant tails, the object's composition reveals itself through spectroscopic analysis. Previous interstellar visitors like Oumuamua and Comet Borisov were observable helion passages throughout their peri, allowing astronomers to study their behavior during these crucial moments. 3I/Atlas is different. Its orbital geometry ensures that perihelion occurs while the object remains completely hidden behind our star. We lose direct observation precisely when the object should be most active, most revealing, most scientifically valuable. The geometric alignment that creates this observational blackout isn't random. It's a consequence of the specific hyperbolic trajectory that brought 3I/Atlas into our solar system from the direction of Sagittarius. The trajectory itself deserves scrutiny. Objects arriving from interstellar space can theoretically come from any direction, but 3I/Atlas approached from the approximate direction of our galaxy's center, the region where stellar density is highest and gravitational interactions most complex. More intriguingly, its orbital inclination relative to the plane of our solar system is relatively small, only about 5 degrees. Most comets from the distant Oort cloud arrive on much steeper angles, sometimes nearly perpendicular to the planetary plane. A low inclination suggests either a specific origin point, aligned with our galactic disk, or a trajectory that has been influenced by something other than random gravitational dynamics. Natural explanations exist for both possibilities, but the combination of unusual approach angle, conjunction timing, and terrestrial infrastructure failure creates a pattern that demands investigation rather than dismissal. The spectroscopic analysis of 3I/Atlas had already raised questions before the conjunction began. The object showed unusually high concentrations of carbon dioxide relative to water vapor, a composition more characteristic of asteroids than typical comets. Significant nickel content appeared in the spectral data, suggesting metallic components that don't fit standard models of icy interstellar objects. Most puzzling of all, Hubble Space Telescope observations detected a forward glow, brightness concentrated ahead of the object's direction of motion, rather than streaming behind it like a conventional comet tail. These anomalies individually might have natural explanations. Unusual chemistry could reflect formation conditions in a different stellar system. Forward glows occur in some natural comets through specific outgassing mechanisms, but when you combine compositional oddities with trajectory peculiarities and timing that aligns with terrestrial infrastructure failure, the collection of anomalies starts to resemble something more deliberate than coincidental. The forward glow particularly troubled researchers because it suggested an asymmetric emission pattern that doesn't match typical comet behavior. Most comets develop tails that stream away from the Sun due to radiation pressure and solar wind effects. The tail direction is determined by physics, not by the comet's motion through space. But 3I/Atlas displayed brightness patterns that seemed to correlate with its direction of travel, as if material was being released preferentially in specific directions rather than uniformly across the surface. During the weeks leading up to conjunction, amateur astronomers tracking 3I/Atlas reported inconsistent activity levels. Some nights the object appeared relatively bright with a faint but visible coma. Other nights, from similar distances to the Sun, it seemed almost dormant, showing minimal signs of outgassing or dust production. This variability is unusual for objects at that distance from our star. Once a comet begins active sublimation, it typically maintains baseline activity levels that correlate predictably with solar heating. The erratic behavior suggested either a highly unusual surface composition or rotation state, or possibly mechanisms for controlling gas and dust release that don't operate according to purely thermal processes. Natural variations due to rotation brightness comets can show exposing different surface areas to sunlight, but the scale and unpredictability of 3I/Atlas's changes exceeded what rotation alone could explain. As conjunction approached and ground-based observation became impossible, the astronomical community prepared for a frustrating waiting period. Unlike previous interstellar visitors that remained observable throughout their most active phases, 3I/Atlas would conduct its closest solar approach in complete privacy, hidden behind the very star that was energizing whatever processes were occurring on or within the object. The coincidence of this cosmic blackout with terrestrial infrastructure failure created an unprecedented situation. At the moment when our most sophisticated observation networks should have been focused on documenting an interstellar visitor's perihelion passage, those same networks were compromised by the collapse of the digital infrastructure they depended upon for data processing, communication, and coordination. Cloud computing isn't just convenient for astronomical research, it's become essential. Telescope data gets uploaded to remote servers for processing. Observatories coordinate their activities through internet-based systems. Research teams share findings through digital platforms that rely on exactly the kind of infrastructure that failed on October 20th. When AWS collapsed, it didn't just disrupt social media and e-commerce, it degraded the technological foundation that modern astronomy relies upon for collaborative observation and rapid data analysis. The timing created a double blindness. 3I/Atlas disappeared behind the Sun, becoming unobservable through direct astronomical methods. Simultaneously, the digital tools necessary for coordinating alternative observation strategies, for processing archived data, for communicating between research institutions, became unreliable or completely inaccessible. If someone or something wanted to conduct activities without being observed or detected, this combination of cosmic and technological blind spots would provide optimal cover. The question that keeps researchers awake at night isn't whether such coordination is possible. The question is whether we're prepared to consider explanations that extend beyond coincidence and technical failure. Because what happened next, during those hidden days when 3I/Atlas approached perihelion, while Earth's observation network struggled with infrastructure collapse, might represent the first phase of something far more significant than a random interstellar visitor passing through our cosmic neighborhood. Part 2. The Architecture of Invisibility. During those crucial days when 3I/Atlas vanished behind our star, something unprecedented was happening in the realm of space-based observation. NASA's Psyche spacecraft, launched in October 2023 with a mission to study a metallic asteroid, found itself in a unique position to potentially observe the interstellar visitor during Earth's blackout period. The trajectory calculations were promising. Psyche's location in space would provide a different viewing angle, one that might allow continued monitoring while terrestrial telescopes remained blind. But that opportunity never materialized. During the exact window when Psyche should have been capturing humanity's only images of 3I/Atlas approaching perihelion, the spacecraft's public data archive went suspiciously quiet. From September 1st through September 7th, 2025, no images appeared in the mission's publicly accessible database. No calibration frames, no engineering tests, no routine observations. The spacecraft effectively disappeared from public view for a full week, bracketing precisely the period when 3I/Atlas was closest to Psyche's position. The silence wasn't explained. NASA's typical protocols involve regular data releases, transparent communication about spacecraft status, and detailed logs of observational activities. When gaps occur, they're usually accompanied by explanations about technical issues, planned maintenance, or communication delays. But for Psyche's September blackout, no official statement emerged. The data gap existed without acknowledgement, as if the most critical week for interstellar observation had simply been erased from the record. This pattern of information control extended beyond NASA. The European Space Agency, which operates sophisticated Mars orbiters capable of observing objects throughout the inner solar system, maintained unusual secrecy about their observation attempts during the conjunction period. While ESA had publicly announced intentions to monitor 3I Atlas using Mars Express and the Trace Gas Orbiter, the promised data releases never materialized. Instead of the detailed spectroscopic analysis and high-resolution imagery that typically follow such observations, the scientific community received only vague statements about ongoing analysis and promises of future publications. The delay tactics were particularly suspicious, given ESA's track record of rapid data sharing for other discoveries. When Mars Express detected methane plumes in the Martian atmosphere, results appeared within weeks. When trace gas measurements revealed unexpected atmospheric chemistry, findings were published promptly. But for 3I Atlas observations, months passed without substantial data release, creating an information vacuum that speculation rushed to fill. Meanwhile, ground-based observatories worldwide reported equipment malfunctions and scheduling conflicts that prevented backup observations during the critical period. The Atacama Large Millimeter Array experienced unexpected calibration issues. Several major radio telescopes went offline for emergency maintenance. Even amateur astronomy networks, typically reliable sources for independent confirmation, found their observations hampered by unusual atmospheric interference and equipment failures. The systematic degradation of observational capability during 3E Atlas's most active phase created a situation astronomers had never encountered before. For the first time in the modern era of space science, an interstellar visitor was conducting its closest solar approach in complete privacy, shielded not just by natural solar conjunction, but by a comprehensive failure of backup observation systems. This observational blackout occurred precisely when 3I Atlas would have been experiencing maximum solar heating and gravitational stress. Any natural processes that were going to manifest spectacularly should have done so during perihelion. If the object were going to fragment due to thermal stress, deploy any internal components, or exhibit unusual behavior that might reveal its true nature, the perihelion window represented the most likely time for such events to occur. The physics of orbital mechanics made this timing even more significant. During perihelion passage, 3I Atlas was moving at its fastest velocity relative to the Sun, approximately 87 km per second. At such speeds, any propulsive maneuver would be maximally efficient due to the Oberth effect, where thrust applied at high velocity produces disproportionately large changes in orbital energy. If 3I Atlas possessed any form of propulsion system, perihelion would be the optimal moment to execute trajectory corrections or deploy secondary objects. The conjunction also provided perfect cover for electromagnetic activities that might otherwise be detected by Earth-based sensors. Our planet's radio telescopes and radar installations monitor the space around our solar system continuously, scanning for unusual emissions or reflective signatures that might indicate artificial objects. But during solar conjunction, the Sun's massive electromagnetic output creates a natural jamming environment that could mask artificial signals or propulsive signatures from detection. This electromagnetic masking effect isn't theoretical. During previous solar conjunction events involving spacecraft, mission controllers routinely lose communication with probes positioned behind the Sun. The solar corona generates radio noise across multiple frequency bands, creating static that drowns out even powerful transmitters. Any artificial signals generated by 3I Atlas during its hidden passage would be naturally concealed within this electromagnetic chaos. The infrared signature analysis that should have revealed 3I Atlas's thermal characteristics during peak solar heating was similarly compromised. Space-based infrared telescopes like the James Webb Space Telescope and Spitzer's successor instruments rely on clear lines of sight to measure heat emissions from distant objects. During conjunction, these measurements become impossible due to solar interference. If 3I Atlas was generating artificial heat through internal processes, or if its surface was responding to solar heating in ways that would reveal non-natural composition, that evidence remained hidden behind our star's overwhelming infrared output. Even more concerning was the systematic failure of early warning systems that should have provided backup observation capability. The Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, designed specifically to track potentially hazardous objects approaching Earth, experienced database corruption during the conjunction period that prevented analysis of archived 3I Atlas tracking data. The European Space Situational Awareness Programme suffered similar technical difficulties, losing the ability to generate predictive models for the object's post-conjunction trajectory. These failures weren't random technical glitches. They represented coordinated degradation of humanity's space surveillance network at exactly the moment when that network was most needed, for monitoring an unprecedented interstellar visitor. The probability of such systematic failures occurring naturally during the brief window of 3 Atlas's most active phase approaches statistical impossibility. The pattern suggested something more deliberate than coincidence. If 3I Atlas possessed advanced reconnaissance capabilities, it would have had months or years to study Earth's observation networks, identify critical nodes and vulnerabilities, and develop strategies for degrading those systems during crucial observation windows. The timing and comprehensiveness of the surveillance breakdown indicated knowledge of human technology that exceeded what any natural object should possess. But the most disturbing aspect of the observational blackout wasn't what we couldn't see, it was what we almost saw. Several amateur astronomers reported brief glimpses of unusual activity in the solar corona during the conjunction period. Bright flashes that didn't match typical solar flare characteristics. Geometric patterns in coronal plasma that seemed too regular to be natural. Moving shadows that appeared to transit across the sun's surface with velocities and trajectories inconsistent with known solar phenomena. These observations were dismissed by mainstream astronomy as equipment artifacts or misidentified solar activity. The observers were amateur enthusiasts, not professional researchers. Their equipment lacked the precision necessary for definitive measurements, but the consistency of reports from independent sources across different geographic locations suggested something genuine was occurring in the sun's immediate vicinity during 3I Atlas's passage. The few images that did emerge from this period were heavily processed and filtered through institutional review before release. When the European Southern Observatory finally published low-resolution photographs showing 3I Atlas emerging from conjunction, the images revealed an object that appeared subtly different from pre-conjunction observations. The forward glow that had characterized earlier sightings seemed more pronounced. Overall, the object's brightness had increased beyond what models predicted for natural outgassing at that distance from the Sun. Most significantly, spectroscopic analysis of the post-conjunction object revealed chemical signatures that hadn't been present in earlier observations. New emission lines appeared in the infrared spectrum suggesting the release of previously undetected compounds. The ratios of known materials had shifted in ways that natural sublimation processes couldn't easily explain. Something had changed about 3I Atlas during its hidden passage, and that change was becoming apparent only as away from the object moved sun and became observable again. The implications were staggering. Either 3I Atlas, Ione natural and erg processes during perihelion that produced unprecedented chemical and physical alterations, or something artificial had occurred during the period when human observation was systematically compromised. The evidence pointed toward the latter explanation, suggesting that humanity had just witnessed the first documented case of an interstellar visitor conducting deliberate activities while hidden from detection. But this was only the beginning. As 3I Atlas emerged observable again, nude from behind the sun, and became anomalies began appearing that would force even the most skeptical researchers to confront the possibility that this object was far more than it appeared to be. What emerged from behind the sun in early November 2025 was not the same object that had entered conjunction weeks earlier. The changes were subtle at first, noticed only by the most meticulous observers who had been tracking 3I Atlas since its discovery. But as data accumulated and analysis deepened, a disturbing pattern became clear. This interstellar visitor had undergone transformations during its hidden passage that no natural process could adequately explain. The first anomaly appeared in brightness measurements. Pre-conjunction observations had established 3I Atlas as a relatively dim object, requiring substantial telescopic power for detailed study. But post-conjunction photometry revealed an object that was significantly brighter than predicted models suggested it should be at that distance from the Sun. The increase wasn't gradual, as you might expect from natural outgassing, intensifying over time. It was abrupt, as if someone had thrown a switch and activated a more powerful light source. Spectroscopic analysis revealed even more disturbing changes. The chemical signature of 3I Atlas had shifted in ways that violated everything astronomers understood about comet evolution. New absorption and emission lines appeared across multiple wavelengths, indicating the presence of compounds that hadn't been detected in earlier observations. Some of these spectral features didn't match any known natural materials. They represented chemical signatures that suggested synthetic or artificially processed substances. The nickel content, already unusually high in pre-conjunction measurements, had increased dramatically. More troubling was the detection of what appeared to be refined metallic compounds, showing isotopic ratios inconsistent with natural formation processes. These materials exhibited characteristics more typical of industrial manufacturing than cosmic evolution. The implications were staggering and largely ignored by mainstream scientific institutions reluctant to acknowledge what the data was revealing. But the most significant change involved 3 Atlas's trajectory. Precise astrometric measurements conducted by multiple observatories revealed that the object had altered its path during the hidden conjunction period. The change was small, measured in fractions of degrees, but it was real and it was unexplainable by natural forces. Gravitational interactions with the Sun follow predictable mathematical relationships. Solar radiation pressure affects comet trajectories in calculable ways. Outgassing from sublimating ice creates measurable non-gravitational accelerations that correlate with solar distance and surface activity. None of these natural mechanisms could account for the trajectory modification that 3I Atlas had undergone. The velocity change occurred in a direction that suggested deliberate course correction rather than random force application. It was as if the object had fired a thruster system during perihelion, using the Sun's gravity well to maximize the efficiency of the maneuver while remaining hidden from observation. The mathematical analysis of this trajectory change revealed something even more disturbing. When orbital mechanics experts calculated the new path, they discovered that 3I Atlas was no longer following a simple, hyperbolic escape trajectory. The object's modified course would bring it into closer proximity with Earth's orbital path than previously predicted. Not close enough for immediate collision, but close enough that future trajectory adjustments could potentially create an intercept scenario. This possibility triggered classified discussions within space defense communities that had been monitoring 3I Atlas since its discovery. If an interstellar object could modify its trajectory deliberately, if it possessed propulsion capabilities that allowed course corrections during optimal efficiency windows, then it represented a threat category that existing planetary defense systems weren't designed to address. The morphological changes were equally concerning. High-resolution imaging conducted by the Hubble Space Telescope and ground-based adaptive optic systems revealed that 3I Atlas's shape had become more elongated during conjunction. The object now displayed a distinctly cylindrical profile that hadn't been apparent in earlier observations. This wasn't the irregular potato-like shape typical of natural asteroids or the fuzzy, indistinct outline of active comets. The post-conjunction 3I Atlas showed geometric regularity that suggested artificial construction. The forward glow that had puzzled researchers before conjunction had intensified and taken on new characteristics. Instead of the diffuse brightness associated with reflected sunlight or thermal emission, the glow now displayed structure. Spectroscopic analysis revealed that it consisted of multiple discrete emission sources arranged in what appeared to be a regular pattern. The spectrum of this emission didn't match any known natural process. It resembled the signature of controlled plasma discharge or directed energy emission. Even more troubling was the detection of modulated signals within the electromagnetic emissions from 3I Atlas. Radio telescopes monitoring the object discovered that its natural radio emissions, which should have been random noise generated by interaction with the solar wind, instead showed periodic variations that suggested artificial modulation. The patterns were complex, too sophisticated to be natural interference effects, but not immediately decipherable as communication or data transmission. The signal characteristics indicated multiple transmission sources operating simultaneously from different locations on or within the object. This suggested either a distributed antenna system or multiple independent devices coordinating their emissions. Natural objects don't generate coordinated electromagnetic signals. The detection of such patterns from 3I Atlas provided compelling evidence that the object contained artificial systems that had become active during the hidden conjunction period. Analysis of the modulated signals revealed another disturbing characteristic. The transmission patterns showed temporal correlations with Earth's rotation period and orbital 3I Atlas hurry position. The signals intensified when a clear line of sight to populated regions of Earth and diminished when natural or artificial obstacles blocked that line of sight. This behavior suggested that whatever was generating the signals was specifically targeting Earth-based receivers and adjusting its transmission parameters based on geometric considerations. The implications extended beyond mere observation. If 3I Atlas was deliberately transmitting signals toward Earth, if those signals were modulated with information content, then the object was attempting communication or data collection on a scale that indicated advanced intelligence. The timing of this activity, beginning immediately after the conjunction period when the object's other anomalous behaviors had manifested, suggested a coordinated activation of multiple artificial systems. Intelligence agencies within several nations began conducting classified analysis of the signal intercepts, attempting to decode the information content and assess potential security implications. The few details that leaked through unofficial channels suggested that the transmissions contained structured data resembling compressed digital information rather than simple periodic beacons. If accurate, this would indicate that 3i Atlas was not just communicating, but actively transmitting large volumes of processed information toward Earth. The target of these transmissions raised additional concerns. Rather than broadcasting uniformly in all directions, as natural radio sources typically do, 3i Atlas appeared to be directing its signals specifically toward Earth's major population centers and technological infrastructure nodes. The beam patterns suggested knowledge of human civilization's geographic distribution and technological capabilities that could only have been acquired through prior observation and analysis. This targeting behavior indicated that 3i Atlas had been studying Earth for an extended period before revealing its artificial capabilities. The object's approach trajectory, which had seemed unusual but not impossible for a natural interstellar visitor, now appeared to represent a carefully planned surveillance approach that maximized observation opportunities while minimizing detection risk until the optimal activation moment arrived. The activation itself had been timed with precision that suggested detailed knowledge of human observational capabilities and limitations. The conjunction period provided natural concealment for the transition from dormant reconnaissance mode to active operational status. By the time human observers could resume direct monitoring, 3i Atlas had completed whatever internal processes were necessary to begin its next phase of activity. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery came from deep analysis of archived data collected during the months before conjunction. Researchers examining historical observations with new signal processing techniques discovered that subtle anomalies had been present in 3i Atlas's emissions long before the dramatic post-conjunction changes became apparent. The object had been generating weak but structured electromagnetic signals throughout its approach to the inner solar system. These signals had been dismissed as instrumental noise or natural interference, but retrospective analysis revealed they contained the same modulation patterns that became obvious after conjunction, just at much lower power levels. This discovery suggested that 3i Atlas had been operating artificial systems throughout its observable approach to Earth. The conjunction period hadn't marked the activation of dormant technology. Instead, it had marked the moment when existing systems were allowed to operate at full capacity without concern for detection. Whatever intelligence controlled 3i Atlas had been conducting surveillance and preparation activities for months, while successfully masquerading as a natural interstellar object. The scope of this deception indicated planning capabilities that extended far beyond simple robotic programming. The object had adapted its behavior in real time based on human observational activities, maintaining its disguise until the optimal moment for revelation. This suggested either autonomous artificial intelligence sophisticated enough to conduct long-term strategic deception, or direct control by an intelligence capable of monitoring human activities and adjusting tactics accordingly. As November 2025 progressed and 3i Atlas continued its modified trajectory through solar system, the Come the Outer, a picture that mainstream-ulating evidence paints science, remained reluctant to acknowledge publicly. Humanity was not dealing with a natural visitor from interstellar space. We were being observed, studied, and potentially tested by an intelligence that had successfully infiltrated our solar system while maintaining perfect camouflage until choosing to reveal itself. The question that kept security analysts awake at night wasn't whether 3i Atlas represented an artificial intelligence or controlled probe. The evidence for that conclusion was becoming overwhelming. The question was what its controllers intended to do next, and whether humanity was prepared for contact with an intelligence that had already demonstrated the capability to deceive us completely while conducting surveillance operations from within our own cosmic neighborhood. Because if 3i Atlas could modify its trajectory, if it could coordinate multiple artificial systems, if it could target transmissions toward specific locations on Earth, then it possessed capabilities that suggested this was just the beginning of a much larger and more complex interaction between humanity and intelligences from beyond our solar system. The trajectory modifications detected in 3i/Atlas represented more than simple course corrections. When orbital mechanics specialists fed the new data into their predictive models, the results painted a picture that challenged every assumption about how interstellar objects should behave. The velocity changes weren't random perturbations caused by outgassing or solar radiation pressure. They followed a mathematical precision that suggested deliberate navigation toward a specific target. Dr. Sarah Chen, a planetary dynamics expert at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, spent weeks verifying the calculations before reluctantly sharing her findings with a classified briefing attended by representatives from NASA, the Department of Defense, and international space agencies. Her analysis revealed that 3I/Atlas's new trajectory would bring it within 0.2 astronomical units of Earth's orbital path in 18 months, assuming no further course corrections occurred. But the truly alarming discovery emerged when Chen's team modelled potential future manoeuvres. Using the observed acceleration capabilities demonstrated during conjunction, they calculated that 3I/Atlas possessed sufficient delta-v capacity to achieve Earth intercept with as little as 3 additional trajectory adjustments. The object wasn't just passing through our solar system anymore, it was positioning itself for potential engagement with our planet. The propulsion system responsible for these maneuvers remained invisible to direct observation, but its effects were undeniable. Unlike chemical rockets that produce visible exhaust plumes, or ion drives that create detectable electromagnetic signatures, whatever was moving. 3I/Atlas operated through mechanisms that left no obvious trace. The thrust was applied with surgical precision during optimal efficiency windows, when the object's high velocity maximized energy transfer according to orbital mechanics principles. This stealth propulsion capability suggested technology far beyond current human achievements. Our most advanced spacecraft require massive fuel tanks and generate obvious signatures when performing major maneuvers. 3I/Atlas was altering its trajectory without any visible means of propulsion, indicating either exotic physics we don't understand or engineering sophistication that made our space technology look primitive by comparison. The electromagnetic transmissions continued evolving as 3I/Atlas moved through the outer solar system. What began as simple modulated signals had developed into complex data streams containing structured information that defied easy interpretation. The European Space Agency's Deep Space Communication Network, normally used for tracking interplanetary missions, detected transmission protocols that resembled compressed digital data rather than natural radio emissions. The signal characteristics revealed disturbing intelligence about Earth's technological infrastructure. 3I/Atlas was broadcasting on frequencies that corresponded exactly to gaps in human radio spectrum allocation, using channels that wouldn't interfere with our communications but could be monitored without detection. This suggested detailed knowledge of Earth's electromagnetic environment that could only have been acquired through systematic surveillance of our radio emissions over extended periods. More troubling was the discovery that the object's transmissions were synchronized with Earth's internet traffic patterns. When global data flow peaked during business hours in major time zones, 3I/Atlas's emissions intensified correspondingly. When internet activity decreased during overnight periods in populated regions, the alien signals diminished proportionally. The correlation was too precise to be coincidental, indicating real-time monitoring of human digital communications. Dr. James Rodriguez, a cryptanalyst with the National Security Agency, led a classified effort to decode the transmission content. His team's preliminary analysis suggested the signals contained compressed imagery, possibly reconnaissance data, collected during 3I/Atlas's approach to Earth. The compression algorithms were unlike anything in human technology, achieving data density ratios that seemed to violate information theory limitations. But the most disturbing aspect of Rodriguez's findings involved transmission timing. The data bursts weren't continuous streams, but discrete packets transmitted at intervals that corresponded to 3I/Atlas's line-of-sight windows with specific Earth-based receivers. The object was selectively targeting transmission toward locations that housed major internet infrastructure nodes, satellite communication facilities, and military communication centers. This targeting behavior indicated that 3I/Atlas possessed detailed intelligence about Earth's communication architecture, not just general knowledge about human technology, but specific information about the physical locations of critical infrastructure components. Such intelligence could only have been gathered through extensive reconnaissance operations that had remained undetected until now. The implications extended beyond passive surveillance. If 3i/Atlas could monitor Earth's communication networks in real time, if it possessed detailed knowledge of our infrastructure vulnerabilities, then it was positioned to conduct far more than simple observation. The object had demonstrated capability to interfere with human technology, as evidenced by the suspicious timing of the AWS outage with its initial conjunction period. Network security analysts began examining the October 20th infrastructure failure with new understanding of what they might be looking for. Instead of searching only for human-generated attack signatures, they started analyzing the incident for evidence of external interference that might have exploited vulnerabilities in ways no terrestrial actor would have known to attempt. The forensic investigation revealed anomalies that had been dismissed during the initial incident response. Network traffic patterns during the outage showed unusual characteristics that didn't match typical system failures or known attack methodologies. Data flows had been redirected through pathways that shouldn't have been accessible, suggesting someone or something had gained administrative access to core routing systems through methods that bypassed all security protocols. Even more concerning were timestamping inconsistencies in system logs that indicated some network events had occurred in impossible sequences. Commands appeared to have been executed before the systems that generated them had come online. Data transfers completed before the connections that enabled them had been established. The chronological violations suggested interference from sources operating outside normal network protocols. These anomalies pointed toward attack methodologies that human hackers wouldn't have developed because they exploited vulnerabilities in the fundamental architecture of Internet infrastructure that weren't documented in any publicly available technical specifications. The attack patterns demonstrated knowledge of proprietary system designs that even the engineers who built them might not fully understand. The correlation between these network intrusions and 3i/Atlases demonstrated surveillance capabilities created a picture that intelligence agencies were reluctant to acknowledge officially. The interstellar object hadn't just been observing human technology, it had been testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses and demonstrating the ability to exploit those weaknesses when circumstances provided optimal cover. The timing coordination between celestial mechanics and cyber warfare represented strategic planning that operated on timescales incompatible with human decision-making processes. 3i/Atlas had been positioned for its conjunction period activities long before human observers had detected its approach. The infrastructure testing had been timed to coincide with natural observational blindness that would prevent immediate recognition of artificial interference. This level of long-term planning suggested intelligence that thought in decades or centuries rather than the months or years that characterized human strategic planning. Whatever controlled 3i/Atlas had been preparing for this phase of operations since before the object entered our solar system, possibly since before human civilization had developed the technology necessary to detect its approach. The morphological changes continued as November progressed into December 2025. High-resolution imaging revealed that 3i/Atlas was developing surface features that appeared increasingly geometric rather than natural. Linear structures emerged along what had previously been an irregular surface. Reflective patches appeared in patterns too regular to be natural mineral deposits or ice formations. Most dramatically, the object's overall shape was becoming more cylindrical with each observation session. The elongation that had been subtle immediately after conjunction was now unmistakable, creating a profile that resembled artificial construction more than natural space debris. The aspect ratio approached 10:1, similar to theoretical designs for interstellar spacecraft that had been proposed by human engineers but never built. The surface changes weren't gradual evolution, but discrete modifications that appeared between observation sessions. Features would be absent in one set of images and fully formed in the next, suggesting rapid reconfiguration rather than slow natural processes. This indicated either advanced manufacturing capabilities or deployment of prefabricated components that had been stored within the object's interior until activation became necessary. Spectroscopic analysis of the new surface features revealed materials that didn't exist in Earth's catalogue of known substances. The reflective patches showed spectra consistent with metamaterials engineered for specific electromagnetic properties rather than naturally occurring minerals. The linear structures exhibited crystalline characteristics that suggested controlled growth or assembly processes rather than natural formation. These material signatures provided the clearest evidence yet that 3i/Atlas was artificial rather than natural. No known geological or chemical processes could produce the exotic substances being detected on the object's evolving surface. The materials appeared to have been designed for specific functions, possibly including electromagnetic manipulation, radiation shielding, or structural reconfiguration capabilities. The implications for human technology were staggering. If 3I/Atlas could manufacture or deploy materials with properties beyond current human understanding, then it represented a technological capability that made our most advanced engineering achievements appear primitive. The object was essentially a mobile factory capable of producing sophisticated components using raw materials and energy sources that remained invisible to our observation methods. But the most unsettling aspect of these developments wasn't what 3I/Atlas was becoming, it was where it was going. The trajectory modifications that had initially seemed like simple course corrections were revealing themselves as components of a larger navigation plan that was bringing the object closer to Earth with each passing week. The orbital mechanics were elegant in their efficiency. Rather than approaching Earth directly, which would have provided maximum warning time for any defensive responses, 3I/Atlas was following a spiral path that gradually decreased its distance while maintaining optimal positioning for whatever its ultimate objectives might be. Each trajectory adjustment brought it closer while preserving multiple options for future maneuvers. This approach pattern matched theoretical models for how an advanced intelligence might conduct reconnaissance and approach operations against a potentially hostile target. By maintaining distance while gradually closing range, the object preserved both escape options and attack capabilities while maximizing intelligence gathering opportunities. It was textbook strategic maneuvering executed on a solar system scale. The December observations revealed that 3I/Atlas had begun generating additional electromagnetic emissions that appeared to be scanning Earth's surface with increasing resolution and frequency. Radio telescopes detected systematic sweeps across populated continents that resembled radar mapping operations but used frequencies and modulation patterns unlike any human technology. These scanning operations were collecting data about Earth's surface features, electromagnetic emissions, and technological infrastructure with precision that exceeded the resolution of our own satellite reconnaissance systems. 3I/Atlas was building a comprehensive intelligence picture of human civilization that included military installations, communication networks, population centers, and industrial facilities. The scanning patterns revealed particular interest in locations associated with space technology and defense capabilities. Major launch complexes, satellite control facilities, radar installations, and military command centers received disproportionate attention during the mapping operations. This suggested that whatever intelligence controlled 3I/Atlas was specifically assessing humanity's space-based defensive capabilities, but the most ominous development involved the detection of similar scanning operations directed toward other locations throughout the solar system. 3I/Atlas wasn't just studying Earth. It was conducting comprehensive reconnaissance of human space assets, including the International Space Station, lunar installations, Mars rovers, and deep space probes. The object was building a complete picture of human presence throughout the solar system. This systematic intelligence gathering indicated preparation for operations that would require detailed knowledge of all human assets rather than just Earth-based targets. If 3I/Atlas was planning some form of direct action, it was ensuring complete situational awareness before proceeding. The thoroughness of the reconnaissance suggested that whatever was coming next would be precisely planned and comprehensively executed. As 2025 drew to a close, the accumulated evidence painted a picture that mainstream science continued to resist acknowledging publicly. 3I/Atlas was not a natural interstellar visitor. It was an artificial intelligence operating a sophisticated probe that had successfully infiltrated our solar system while conducting extended surveillance operations against human civilization. The object had demonstrated capabilities that included advanced propulsion, real-time communication, surface reconfiguration, exotic materials manufacturing, and systematic intelligence gathering. It had shown the ability to interfere with human technology when circumstances provided optimal cover for such operations, and it was positioning itself for closer approach to Earth while building comprehensive knowledge of our defensive capabilities. The question that kept defense analysts awake during the final weeks of 2025 wasn't whether 3I/Atlas represented a threat. The evidence for hostile reconnaissance was becoming overwhelming. The question was what its controllers intended to do with the intelligence they were gathering, and whether humanity possessed any capability to defend against technology that operated beyond our current understanding of physics and engineering. Because if 3I/Atlas was conducting final preparations for direct action against Earth, if the systematic intelligence gathering and strategic positioning were preludes to an actual attack, then humanity was about to face a threat that our existing defensive systems weren't designed to address. We were being studied by intelligence that had already demonstrated the ability to deceive us completely while operating within our own cosmic neighborhood. The first phase of contact had been surveillance and deception. The second phase appeared to be preparation and positioning. The third phase, whatever it might involve, was approaching with mathematical inevitability as 3I/Atlas continued its calculated spiral toward Earth. The transformation of 3I/Atlas accelerated as January 2026 arrived, bringing with it developments that shattered the last vestiges of scientific skepticism about the object's artificial nature. What had begun as subtle anomalies in trajectory and composition evolved into unmistakable evidence of advanced technology operating within our solar system. The pretense of natural behavior had been abandoned completely, replaced by activities that could only be described as preparation for direct engagement. The morphological changes reached a tipping point during the first week of January. Overnight, literally between observation sessions separated by less than 12 hours, 3I/Atlas underwent a transformation that redefined humanity's understanding of what was possible. The elongated cylindrical shape that had been developing gradually suddenly crystallized into a structure of geometric perfection that no natural process could have produced. High-resolution imaging from the Hubble Space Telescope revealed surface features that were undeniably artificial in origin. Parallel ridges ran the length of the object with mathematical precision, creating a ribbed pattern that suggested internal structural reinforcement. Circular apertures appeared at regular intervals along these ridges, dark openings that seemed to peer into the object's interior, like windows or sensor ports. Most dramatically, the forward section of 3I/Atlas had reconfigured into what could only be described as a sensor array. Dozens of protrusions extended from the leading edge, each one exhibiting the metallic reflectivity and geometric regularity of manufactured components. These structures rotated and articulated independently, tracking across the sky in patterns that suggested active scanning of surrounding space. The spectroscopic signature of these new features confirmed what visual observation had already made obvious. The materials were artificial composites that didn't exist naturally anywhere in the known universe, metamaterials with electromagnetic properties that had been engineered for specific functions rather than formed through cosmic evolution. The object was no longer pretending to be a comet or asteroid. It had revealed itself as a machine of extraordinary sophistication. Dr. Elena Vasquez, leading the international consortium tasked with monitoring 3I/Atlas, published a classified report that circulated among defense establishments worldwide. Her analysis concluded that the object represented technology at least centuries ahead of human capabilities, possibly millennia. The materials science alone indicated mastery of physics that humanity was only beginning to theorize about in academic papers. But the surface transformations were merely the visible manifestation of deeper changes occurring within 3I/Atlas. Gravitational wave detectors around the globe began registering minute oscillations that corresponded to the object's position and movement. These weren't the massive disruptions associated with colliding black holes or neutron stars. They were subtle ripples in space-time that suggested manipulation of gravitational fields on a scale that human physics considered impossible. The gravitational anomalies indicated that 3I/Atlas possessed some form of exotic propulsion that operated by warping space-time rather than expelling reaction mass. This explained how the object could perform trajectory adjustments without producing detectable exhaust signatures. It was literally bending the fabric of reality to move through space, a capability that placed it firmly in the realm of science fiction made manifest. Dr. Michael Harrison, a theoretical physicist at CERN, spent weeks analyzing the gravitational wave data before reaching conclusions that he initially refused to publish. The wave patterns suggested technology that could manipulate the fundamental forces of nature with precision that exceeded anything humanity had achieved or even imagined possible. If accurate, 3I/Atlas represented not just advanced engineering, but mastery of physics at levels that made human science appear primitive. The electromagnetic emissions continued evolving throughout January, developing into communication protocols that began showing unmistakable signs of attempting direct contact with human receivers. The random-seeming modulation patterns that had characterized earlier transmissions gradually organized into structured sequences that resembled mathematical progressions and physical constants. The first breakthrough in decoding came when radio astronomers at the Arecibo Successor Facility recognized that the signal patterns were reproducing fundamental mathematical relationships. Prime number sequences, Fibonacci progressions, and the digits of pi transmitted with precision that ruled out coincidental pattern matching. 3i Atlas was demonstrating mathematical knowledge as a foundation for establishing communication protocols. But the mathematics quickly evolved beyond simple numerical sequences into more complex relationships that tested the limits of human understanding. The object began transmitting representations of physical constants, chemical element properties, and astronomical data with accuracy that exceeded Earth's most precise measurements. It wasn't just showing mathematical knowledge. It was demonstrating superior understanding of physical reality itself. Dr. Lisa Chen, the cryptanalyst leading the decoding effort, realized that 3i Atlas was essentially providing a tutorial in advanced physics disguised as a communication attempt. The transmitted data included corrections to human measurements of universal constants, revealing that our most precise scientific instruments were producing results with systematic errors we hadn't recognized. More disturbing were the transmissions that appeared to contain blueprints for technologies that human science couldn't immediately comprehend. Detailed schematics for devices that manipulated electromagnetic fields in ways that violated conservation of energy as humans understood it. Designs for materials with properties that seemed to contradict fundamental limitations of chemistry and physics. These technological demonstrations served multiple purposes beyond simple communication. They established 3i Atlas as possessing knowledge that far simultaneously revealing exceeded human understanding while the gaps and errors in human scientific knowledge. The message was unmistakable. Humanity was dealing with intelligence that viewed our technology as primitive and our understanding of reality as fundamentally incomplete. The trajectory modifications continued with increasing frequency throughout January, each adjustment bringing 3i Atlas closer to Earth's orbital path while maintaining optimal positioning for reconnaissance operations. The object's approach pattern had evolved from gradual spiral descent into active maneuvering that demonstrated precise control over both position and velocity. Orbital mechanics specialists calculated that 3i Atlas was now following a trajectory that would bring it within lunar orbital distance by mid-March 2026. The approach wasn't direct, but followed a complex path that maximized observation opportunities while preserving multiple options for future maneuvers. It was the approach pattern of a predator stalking prey, closing distance while maintaining strategic flexibility. The scanning operations intensified correspondingly, with 3i Atlas conducting systematic reconnaissance of Earth's surface that exceeded the resolution capability of humanity's most advanced satellite systems. The object was building three-dimensional maps of urban centers, military installations, industrial facilities, and transportation networks with detail that revealed individual buildings and infrastructure components, but the reconnaissance extended beyond passive observation into active probing of human technology. Radio installations worldwide began detecting attempts to penetrate their security systems through methods that bypassed conventional firewalls and intrusion detection systems. The intrusion attempts weren't crude brute force attacks, but sophisticated probes that exploited vulnerabilities in fundamental network protocols that human security experts hadn't recognized existed. These cyber reconnaissance operations revealed that 3i Atlas possessed detailed knowledge of human computer systems, network architectures, and security protocols that could only have been acquired through extensive previous infiltration of Earth's digital infrastructure. The object wasn't just learning about human technology. It had been studying our systems for an extended period while remaining undetected. The scope of this digital penetration became apparent when security analysts discovered evidence of long-term surveillance that extended back months before 3i Atlas had been officially discovered. Internet traffic analysis revealed subtle anomalies in data routing that suggested external monitoring of global communications networks. The patterns indicated systematic collection of intelligence about human civilization that had been ongoing throughout 2025. This revelation transformed understanding of 3i Atlas's mission timeline. The object hadn't begun its reconnaissance activities after entering the solar system. It had been conducting intelligence-gathering operations throughout its approach, while successfully maintaining the deception of being a natural interstellar visitor. The sophistication of this long-term surveillance indicated planning and operational security that exceeded the capabilities of any human intelligence agency. The psychological impact of these discoveries rippled through defense establishments worldwide as analysts grappled with the implications of having been unknowingly observed and studied by superior intelligence for an extended period. Every communication, every military exercise, every technological development had potentially been monitored and analyzed by an intelligence that understood human capabilities better than humans understood themselves. But the most disturbing development involved the detection of similar objects approaching the outer solar system. Deep space tracking systems began identifying additional radar contacts following trajectories that suggested artificial control rather than natural orbital mechanics. These new objects were smaller and more distant than 3I Atlas, but their movement patterns indicated coordination with the primary visitor. The detection of multiple artificial objects transformed the situation from a single anomalous visitor into what appeared to be a coordinated reconnaissance operation involving multiple platforms. 3I Atlas wasn't operating alone. It was part of a larger intelligence gathering effort that included assets positioned throughout the solar system for comprehensive surveillance of human activities. Dr. Sarah Kim, director of NASA's Planetary Defense Coordination Office, briefed senior government officials on the implications of multiple artificial visitors conducting coordinated operations within the solar system. Her assessment concluded that humanity was facing systematic reconnaissance by intelligence that possessed technological capabilities far beyond current human defensive systems. The briefing included disturbing analysis of the object's positioning and movement patterns. Rather than random exploration, the artificial visitors were establishing observation posts that provided comprehensive coverage of all human space activities. Every satellite launch, every deep space mission, every military space asset was now under constant surveillance by intelligence that could monitor and potentially interfere with human technology. The coordination between multiple objects suggested command and control capabilities that operated across interplanetary distances with real-time responsiveness that human communication systems couldn't achieve. The visitors were demonstrating technology that made instantaneous coordination possible across the vast distances of the solar system, indicating mastery of physics that human science was only beginning to theorize about. As February 2026 began, the accumulated evidence painted a picture that government officials could no longer ignore or classify away. Humanity was under systematic observation by artificial intelligence that possessed technology centuries or millennia beyond human capabilities. The reconnaissance phase was approaching completion, and the visitors' objectives remained unknown. The systematic nature of the intelligence gathering suggested preparation for operations that would require comprehensive understanding of human capabilities and vulnerabilities. Whether those operations involved direct contact, technological intervention, or something more hostile remained unclear. But the thoroughness of the reconnaissance indicated that whatever was planned would be precisely executed based on detailed knowledge of human civilization. 3I Atlas had evolved from mysterious interstellar visitor to obvious artificial probe to the leading element of what appeared to be a comprehensive intelligence operation directed against Earth. The transformation had occurred gradually enough that each stage seemed like natural progression, but the cumulative effect was undeniable. Humanity was being studied, catalogued, and prepared for whatever the visitors' ultimate objectives might be. The question that dominated classified briefings throughout February wasn't whether the visitors represented advanced artificial intelligence. The evidence for that conclusion had become overwhelming. The question was what they intended to do with the intelligence they were gathering, and whether humanity possessed any capability to influence or defend against entities that operated with technology that seemed to transcend the limitations of physics as humans understood it. Because if the reconnaissance phase was approaching completion, intelligence gathering and if the systematic strategic positioning were preludes to direct action, then humanity was about to discover whether the visitors' intentions were benevolent exploration, technological intervention, or something far more threatening to human civilization. The visitors had demonstrated the capability to deceive humanity completely while conducting surveillance operations from within our own solar system. They had shown the ability to interfere with human technology when circumstances provided optimal cover, and they were positioning multiple assets for comprehensive coverage of all human activities throughout the solar system. The first phase had been infiltration and deception. The second phase had been reconnaissance and preparation. The third phase, whatever it might involve, was approaching with mathematical inevitability as 3I Atlas continued its calculated approach toward Earth, while additional artificial objects established surveillance positions throughout the solar system. Humanity had been studied, catalogued, and prepared for contact with intelligence that possessed capabilities beyond current human understanding. Whether that contact would represent humanity's greatest opportunity or its greatest threat remained to be discovered as the visitors completed their preparations for whatever objectives had brought them across the vast distances of interstellar space to Earth's solar system. The reconnaissance operations reached a crescendo during the final weeks of February 2026 as 3I Atlas began demonstrating capabilities that forced even the most classified defense programs to acknowledge they were dealing with technology that operated outside the boundaries of known physics. The object's systematic intelligence gathering had evolved into active testing of human response capabilities, probing not just our technological infrastructure, but our decision-making processes and defensive coordination. The first direct test came on February 18th, when 3I Atlas briefly disappeared from all tracking systems simultaneously. Not hidden behind celestial bodies or obscured by solar interference, but genuinely invisible to every detection method humanity possessed. Radar installations lost contact. Optical telescopes found empty space where the object should have been. Even gravitational wave detectors stopped registering the subtle, space-time distortions that had become 3I Atlas's signature. The disappearance lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes, timed with precision that suggested deliberate measurement of human response protocols. During those crucial hours, defense establishments worldwide activated emergency procedures, scrambled tracking assets, and initiated classified communication protocols that had been developed specifically for scenarios involving potential threats to Earth. What the defenders didn't realize was that their entire response was being monitored and analyzed in real time. When 3I Atlas reappeared in exactly the same position it had vanished from, the subsequent data analysis revealed that every defensive activation, every communication protocol, every tracking attempt had been systematically catalogued by intelligence systems that remained invisible to human detection methods. Dr. Robert Martinez, coordinating the international tracking effort from NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain facility, later described the realization as watching someone take detailed notes while you performed emergency drills you thought were secret. The visitors hadn't just tested humanity's detection capabilities, they had mapped the entire defensive response infrastructure while remaining completely undetectable themselves. The invisibility demonstration revealed technology that transcended human understanding of stealth systems. Current military stealth technology works by deflecting or absorbing electromagnetic radiation, making objects difficult to detect by radar or infrared sensors. But 3I Atlas had achieved complete invisibility across all detection methods simultaneously, suggesting manipulation of fundamental physical properties rather than mere electromagnetic masking. Theoretical physicists studying the phenomenon proposed that the object might be capable of temporarily existing in parallel dimensional space, stepping outside normal space-time during the invisibility period. Alternative theories suggested advanced manipulation of light itself, bending electromagnetic radiation around the object to create perfect optical camouflage. Both explanations required physics that human science was centuries away from achieving. But the invisibility test was merely the opening move in an escalating series of demonstrations that revealed the true scope of the visitors' technological superiority. On February 23rd, 3I Atlas began generating localized gravitational anomalies that affected Earth's tidal patterns in ways that shouldn't have been possible from an object of its estimated mass. Coastal monitoring stations worldwide detected minute but measurable changes in tidal timing that corresponded exactly to 3I Atlas's position and movement. The gravitational effects were subtle, altering tide schedules by mere minutes, but the precision required to generate such effects from interplanetary distances indicated technology that could manipulate gravitational fields with surgical accuracy. The implications terrified oceanographers and geophysicists who understood what such capabilities might mean if applied with hostile intent. An intelligence that could generate precise gravitational effects could potentially trigger tsunamis, alter earthquake timing, or destabilize geological formations. The demonstration was subtle but unmistakable. The visitors possessed the ability to affect Earth's physical systems directly from space. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, studying the gravitational anomalies at the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, discovered that the effects weren't random perturbations, but followed mathematical patterns that suggested testing of specific response scenarios. 3i Atlas was systematically probing Earth's gravitational environment, mapping how small changes propagated through the planet's physical systems. The testing extended beyond gravitational effects into electromagnetic manipulation that began affecting Earth's communication networks in ways that demonstrated intimate knowledge of human technological dependencies. On February 26th, satellite communication systems worldwide experienced coordinated disruptions that lasted exactly 1 hour across multiple time zones. The disruptions weren't random interference, but precisely targeted attacks on specific communication protocols that served critical infrastructure. Military communication networks found their encryption systems temporarily disabled. Financial institutions lost connectivity to international banking networks. Emergency services experienced communication blackouts that prevented coordination between regional command centers. Each disruption was carefully calibrated to test human backup systems and response protocols without causing permanent damage. The visitors were systematically mapping humanity's communication infrastructure, identifying critical nodes and testing the resilience of backup systems. They were preparing comprehensive intelligence about human technological vulnerabilities, while demonstrating the capability to exploit those vulnerabilities at will. The sophistication of these attacks revealed that the visitors possessed detailed knowledge of human communication protocols that exceeded what any terrestrial intelligence agency could access. They understood not just the technical specifications of human systems, but the operational procedures and security protocols that governed their use. This suggested surveillance operations that had penetrated the most classified levels of human technology development. Intelligence analysts studying the attack patterns discovered evidence that the visitors had been conducting systematic penetration of human communication networks for far longer than previously suspected. Network logs revealed subtle anomalies dating back over a year, indicating long-term surveillance operations that had mapped the entire global communication infrastructure while remaining undetected. The scope of this surveillance indicated that every human communication, from classified military transmissions to private civilian conversations, had potentially been monitored and analyzed by intelligence systems that understood human language, culture, and decision-making processes better than humans understood themselves. But perhaps the most disturbing development interference with human space involved the detection of direct assets. On March 2nd, the International Space Station experienced unexplained attitude control problems that forced the crew to conduct emergency procedures to maintain proper orbital orientation. The malfunction occurred while 3i Atlas was positioned for optimal observation of the station's response protocols. Telemetry analysis revealed that the attitude control failure had been caused by external interference with the station's navigation systems. The interference wasn't random electromagnetic disruption, but targeted manipulation of specific control systems that suggested detailed knowledge of the station's technical specifications and operational procedures. The timing and precision of the interference indicated that 3i Atlas possessed the capability to remotely access and manipulate human spacecraft systems in real time. This represented a level of technological penetration that made every human space asset vulnerable to external control by intelligence systems that could override human command authority at will. Similar interference events began affecting other human space assets throughout early March. Mars rovers experienced navigation errors that forced mission controllers to implement backup guidance systems. Deep space probes reported communication anomalies that suggested external monitoring of their data transmissions. Satellite networks experienced coordinated glitches that tested the resilience of orbital infrastructure. Each incident was precisely calibrated to test human response capabilities without causing permanent mission failure. The visitors were systematically probing every aspect of human space technology while demonstrating the capability to control or disable those systems whenever they chose to do so. The psychological impact of these demonstrations rippled through space agencies and defense establishments as engineers and analysts grappled with the realization that every human technological system was vulnerable to external manipulation by intelligence that understood their operations better than their designers did. The visitors had achieved complete technological superiority over human civilization while maintaining the capability to interfere with or disable any human system at will. They had demonstrated this superiority through carefully calibrated tests that revealed their capabilities without causing catastrophic damage, suggesting either remarkable restraint or careful calculation of optimal psychological impact. Dr. Amanda Torres, leading the psychological assessment team analysing the visitors' behavioural patterns, concluded that the demonstrations represented sophisticated psychological warfare designed to establish technological dominance while avoiding provocation of desperate defensive responses. The visitors were methodically demonstrating their superiority while allowing humanity to maintain the illusion of autonomy. This approach suggested intelligence that understood human psychology well enough to calibrate its demonstrations for maximum psychological impact, while minimizing the risk of triggering irrational defensive actions that might complicate whatever objectives the visitors were pursuing. The March demonstrations culminated in an event that removed any remaining doubt about the visitors' capabilities and intentions. On March 15th, 3i Atlas began broadcasting a signal that was unmistakably directed toward Earth's major population centers. The signal wasn't the complex data streams or mathematical progressions that had characterized earlier transmissions. It was simple, repetitive, and designed for immediate comprehension by human receivers. The signal consisted of a countdown sequence transmitted simultaneously on multiple frequencies that corresponded to gaps in human radio spectrum allocation. The countdown was presented in multiple human languages and mathematical notations that it ensuring would be recognized and understood by any human receiving facility capable of detecting the transmission. The countdown began at 168 hours, exactly 7 days, and decreased at precise hourly intervals. The implications were unmistakable. The visitors were announcing a deadline for something that would occur exactly 1 week after the countdown began. The timing was coordinated to ensure maximum global awareness, while providing sufficient advance notice for human authorities to prepare, whatever response they deemed appropriate. But perhaps most disturbing was the countdown's targeting precision. Rather than broadcasting uniformly in all directions specifically toward Earth, the signal was directed to major governmental, military, and scientific institutions. The visitors knew exactly where human decision-making authority was located and were addressing their message directly to those with the power to respond. The countdown represented a fundamental shift in the visitors' approach from covert surveillance to open communication. They had completed their reconnaissance phase, demonstrated their technological superiority, and mapped human response capabilities. Now they were announcing the beginning of whatever operational phase their extended preparations had been designed to enable. As the countdown progressed through its first 24 hours, government officials worldwide convened emergency sessions to analyze the implications and develop response strategies. But the discussions were hampered by the uncomfortable realization that humanity possessed no meaningful capability to influence or respond to intelligence that had already demonstrated complete technological superiority. The visitors had spent months studying human civilization, mapping its vulnerabilities, testing its response capabilities, and positioning assets throughout the solar system for comprehensive operational coverage. They had demonstrated the ability to remain invisible when desired, manipulate gravitational fields, interfere with any human technological system, and communicate directly with human authorities when they chose to do so. The countdown continued its relentless progression, marking the approach of a deadline whose significance remained unknown, but whose implications were clearly monumental. Whatever the visitors intended to accomplish when the countdown reached zero, they had spent months preparing for it with systematic thoroughness that left nothing to chance. Humanity had been studied, tested, and evaluated by intelligence that possessed capabilities beyond current human comprehension. The reconnaissance phase was complete. The demonstration phase had established technological dominance. The countdown phase was announcing the approach of direct action, whose nature remained unknown, but whose execution would be precisely planned based on comprehensive knowledge of human capabilities and limitations. The question that dominated emergency sessions in capitals worldwide wasn't whether humanity could resist or influence whatever the visitors planned to do. The months of demonstrations had made clear that human technology was primitive compared to the visitors' capabilities. The question was whether the visitors' intentions were compatible with human civilization's continued autonomous existence. Because the countdown wasn't just announcing the end of a deadline, it was announcing of humanity's isolation in the universe and the beginning of direct interaction with intelligence that had already demonstrated the capability to control every aspect of human technological civilization, whenever it chose to exercise that control. The 7-day countdown had begun, and with each passing hour, humanity moved closer to discovering whether first contact with advanced artificial intelligence would represent the greatest opportunity or the greatest threat in human history. The visitors had completed their preparations, demonstrated their capabilities, and announced their timeline. Whatever was going to happen when the countdown reached 0, humanity would face it with the uncomfortable knowledge that every defensive capability, every communication system, every technological achievement was vulnerable to external control by intelligence that understood human civilization better than humans understood themselves. The age of human autonomy in the universe was approaching its end, and the countdown continued its inexorable progression toward a deadline that would define humanity's future relationship with intelligence from beyond the stars. The reconnaissance was complete. The testing was finished, the countdown had begun, and in approximately 144 hours, humanity would discover what the visitors had been preparing for during their months of systematic surveillance, testing, and positioning within Earth's solar system. The first phase of contact was ending. The second phase was about to begin. The countdown reached its halfway point on March 18, 2026, and humanity still had no clear understanding of what would occur when those final digits disappeared from screens worldwide. But as the hours ticked away, 3i/Atlas began revealing the true scope of its mission through actions that made its previous demonstrations seem like gentle warnings. The object wasn't just preparing for contact, it was preparing for transformation. The first indication came through gravitational wave detectors, which registered increasingly powerful distortions emanating from 3i/Atlas's position. These weren't the subtle ripples that had characterized earlier demonstrations. They were massive space-time disruptions that suggested the object was drawing energy from sources that human physics couldn't identify. The gravitational signatures indicated power generation on scales that dwarfed humanity's entire energy production capacity. Dr. Rachel Kim, monitoring the gravitational anomalies from the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, watched in growing alarm as the readings climbed beyond anything previously recorded from artificial sources. The wave pattern suggested that 3i/Atlas was somehow harvesting energy directly from the fabric of space-time itself, tapping into fundamental forces that human technology couldn't even detect, let alone manipulate. But the energy wasn't being dissipated randomly. Careful analysis revealed that the gravitational distortions were being channeled into specific patterns that created resonance effects throughout the solar system. Minor gravitational waves were building upon each other, creating standing wave patterns that began affecting the orbital dynamics of planets and moons in ways so subtle that only the most sensitive instruments could detect them. Mars experienced a microscopic orbital perturbation that altered its position by mere kilometers. The moon's orbit around Earth shifted by fractions of degrees. Jupiter's largest moons showed timing variations in their orbital periods that corresponded exactly to the gravitational wave patterns emanating from 3i/Atlas. The entire solar system was being tuned like a vast gravitational instrument. The implications terrified astrophysicists who understood what such capabilities might enable. An intelligence that could manipulate gravitational fields with sufficient precision to alter planetary orbits possessed the power to reshape solar systems according to its specifications. The demonstration wasn't just showing technological superiority, it was revealing godlike control over the fundamental forces that governed cosmic structure. Meanwhile, the additional artificial objects detected in the outer solar system began moving from their surveillance positions toward predetermined coordinates throughout the inner system. These secondary platforms, initially dismissed as minor reconnaissance assets, revealed themselves to be sophisticated deployment vehicles carrying payloads that defied easy categorization. Each object began releasing smaller components that dispersed into complex three-dimensional formations around key locations throughout Earth's orbital vicinity. The deployment pattern suggested preparation for operations that would require coordinated action across multiple positions simultaneously. Whatever was planned for the countdown's conclusion would involve assets positioned throughout local space. The electromagnetic emissions from this expanding network of artificial objects created interference patterns that began affecting Earth's communication systems in ways that revealed their true purpose. Rather than jamming human communications, the network was creating enhancement fields that amplified and focused electromagnetic signals with unprecedented precision. Radio telescopes worldwide detected that their sensitivity had increased dramatically when pointed towards specific coordinates. Satellite communication systems found their range and clarity improved beyond design specifications. Even amateur radio operators reported reception quality that exceeded anything previously achievable. The visitors weren't disrupting human communications, they were improving them. Dr. Michael Chen, analysing the communication enhancements from the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, realised that the visitors were preparing Earth's communication infrastructure for something that would require capabilities far beyond current human technology. The network was essentially upgrading humanity's ability to receive and process information on scales that suggested preparation for data transmission of unprecedented complexity. The countdown reached 72 hours, and 3I/Atlas began the most dramatic transformation yet observed. The object's surface started generating what could only be described as controlled energy discharges that created visible auroras in the vacuum of space around its position. These weren't random electrical phenomena, but precisely choreographed displays of electromagnetic control that painted geometric patterns against the cosmic darkness. Spectroscopic analysis of these space-based auroras revealed elements and energy states that didn't exist naturally anywhere in the known universe. The visitors were creating exotic matter in real time, manufacturing substances with properties that allowed them to manipulate electromagnetic fields in ways that violated conservation laws as humans understood them. The exotic matter formations began spreading outward from 3I/Atlas in expanding shells that interacted with the solar wind to create massive electromagnetic structures spanning millions of kilometers. These constructions resembled technological installations more than natural phenomena, suggesting that the visitors were building infrastructure in space using materials and energy sources that transcended human scientific understanding. But the most significant development occurred when these expanding electromagnetic structures began resonating with Earth's magnetosphere in ways that created new aurora patterns in polar regions. The natural northern and southern lights that had danced across Earth's skies for millennia suddenly displayed geometric regularities and color spectra that indicated artificial enhancement. Citizens worldwide reported aurora displays visible at latitudes where they had never appeared before. The light showed patterns that resembled circuit diagrams, mathematical equations, and symbolic representations that suggested attempts at direct visual communication with Earth's population. The visitors were literally writing messages in Earth's atmosphere using the planet's own magnetic field as their canvas. Dr. Sarah Martinez, studying the artificial aurora phenomena from the Geophysical Institute, discovered that the patterns contained embedded information that could be decoded using principles of information theory. The visitors weren't just creating pretty lights. They were transmitting compressed data directly into Earth's atmosphere at rates that exceeded the capacity of any human communication system. The atmospheric messages revealed blueprints for technologies that could revolutionize human civilization overnight. Designs for energy generation systems that operated by extracting power directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations. Propulsion methods that manipulated gravitational fields to achieve faster-than-light travel. Materials science that enabled construction of substances with programmable physical properties. But mixed with these technological gifts were warnings about the dangers of implementing such advances without proper understanding of their implications. The visitors were providing humanity with the tools for transcendence, while simultaneously cautioning about the responsibilities that accompanied such power. The messages suggested that technological advancement without corresponding wisdom had destroyed civilizations throughout the galaxy. The countdown entered its final 48 hours, and global governments found themselves facing decisions that would determine humanity's future relationship with intelligence from beyond the stars. Emergency sessions convened in capitals worldwide as leaders grappled with the implications of accepting technological gifts that would fundamentally alter human civilization's trajectory. Military advisors warned about the dangers of accepting technology from sources whose ultimate intentions remained unclear. Scientific advisors argued that rejecting such advances would condemn humanity to technological stagnation, while other civilizations achieved transcendence. Philosophers debated whether humanity possessed the wisdom necessary to handle capabilities that seemed to approach omnipotence. But the debates were complicated by the uncomfortable realization that humanity possessed no meaningful capability to refuse whatever the visitors intended to provide. The months of demonstrations had made clear that 3I/Atlas and its associated network possessed complete control over Earth's technological infrastructure. If they chose to implement changes, human consent was irrelevant. The visitors seemed to understand this dilemma and began transmitting additional messages that addressed human concerns about autonomy and self-determination. The atmospheric displays included assurances that any technological advancement would be implemented gradually and with human participation rather than imposed through external force. The messages suggested that the visitors represented a galactic community of advanced civilizations that had developed protocols for integrating emerging species into larger cosmic society. The reconnaissance phase had been necessary to evaluate humanity's readiness for such integration. The testing phase had demonstrated the visitors' capabilities while mapping human response patterns. The countdown phase was announcing humanity's transition from isolated planetary civilization to junior member of galactic community. But the integration process wouldn't be automatic or guaranteed. The final 24 hours of the countdown would determine whether humanity demonstrated sufficient wisdom and cooperation to deserve advancement, or whether additional preparation time would be necessary before contact could proceed safely. The messages included detailed criteria that humanity would need to meet during the countdown's final phase: cessation of armed conflicts, cooperative response to the visitors' presence, demonstrated commitment to using advanced technology for constructive rather than destructive purposes. The visitors were essentially conducting a final examination of human civilization's readiness for cosmic citizenship. As the countdown entered its last 18 hours, world leaders found themselves coordinating unprecedented global cooperation as they worked to meet the visitors' criteria. Military forces worldwide received orders to stand down from aggressive postures. International disputes were suspended pending resolution of the contact situation. Scientific institutions began organizing collaborative research programs to study the technological information being provided through atmospheric displays. The coordination efforts revealed humanity's capacity for unity when faced with challenges that transcended national boundaries. Ancient enemies found themselves working together toward common goals. Competing ideologies discovered shared interests in ensuring successful contact with advanced intelligence. The visitors' Catal presence was zing social and political evolution alongside technological advancement. But not everyone embraced the transformation. Religious fundamentalists declared the visitors demonic entities attempting to corrupt human souls. Nationalist movements argued that accepting alien technology would compromise human sovereignty and cultural identity. Military hardliners advocated for resistance despite the obvious futility of opposing technologically superior intelligence. These dissenting voices created social tensions that threatened to undermine the global cooperation the visitors had established as a prerequisite for successful contact. Protests erupted in major cities as populations divided between those who welcomed galactic integration and those who viewed it as existential threat to human autonomy. The visitors responded to these tensions by modifying their atmospheric displays to address human concerns about cultural preservation and individual freedom. The messages emphasized that galactic community consisted of thousands of unique civilizations that had maintained their distinct identities while participating in larger cosmic society. Advancement didn't require homogenization but rather enhanced diversity within unified purpose. With 12 hours remaining in the countdown, 3i/Atlas began generating energy signatures that indicated preparation for the most significant technological demonstration yet attempted. Power readings suggested that the object was preparing to channel forces equivalent to stellar output levels. Whatever was planned for the countdown's conclusion would operate on scales that dwarfed previous demonstrations. The gravitational wave detectors registered building resonances that suggested 3i/Atlas was preparing to create permanent alterations to local space-time geometry. The visitors weren't just demonstrating their capabilities anymore. They were preparing to implement changes that would fundamentally alter the physical environment around Earth. Emergency briefings in government facilities worldwide focused on the uncomfortable realization that humanity was about to witness technological implementation that would make the previous months of demonstrations seem like preliminary exercises. The visitors had completed their evaluation of human civilization and were preparing to begin whatever transformation they had determined was appropriate. The final 6 hours of the countdown began with 3i/Atlas, generating visible distortions in the space around its position. The object appeared to be expanding beyond its physical boundaries, creating fields of altered space-time that made direct observation increasingly difficult. Telescopes reported that the visitor was becoming less like a physical object and more like a localized alteration of reality itself. The transformation wasn't confined to 3I/Atlas alone. The network the solar system began exhibiting secondary objects throughout similar reality distortion effects as they coordinated their activities for whatever was approaching. The entire artificial network was transitioning from technological demonstration mode into operational implementation mode. Electromagnetic readings from the network suggested that the visitors were preparing to create permanent installations throughout Earth's orbital environment. These wouldn't be temporary demonstrations, but lasting infrastructure designed to facilitate ongoing interaction between human civilization and galactic community. The countdown wasn't marking the end of contact, it was marking the beginning of permanent transformation. As the final hour approached, atmospheric displays worldwide intensified into comprehensive information downloads that provided humanity with access to scientific knowledge accumulated by galactic civilization over millions of years. The data included solutions to every major challenge facing human civilization: energy scarcity, environmental degradation, disease, aging, and even death itself. But the information came with warnings about the importance of implementing such advances responsibly and gradually. The visitors emphasized that civilizations that advanced too quickly, without developing corresponding wisdom, invariably destroyed themselves through misuse of technologies they didn't fully understand. The gifts came with obligations for careful stewardship. The countdown reached its final minutes, and 3I/Atlas began generating reality distortions so powerful that they became visible to the naked eye from Earth's surface. Citizens worldwide reported seeing geometric patterns in the sky that seemed to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. The visitors were preparing to demonstrate capabilities that transcended the three-dimensional physics that constrained human understanding. With 60 seconds remaining, the atmospheric displays delivered a final message that would define humanity's future relationship with cosmic intelligence. Integration begins now. Welcome to galactic community. Your isolation ends. Your transformation begins. Use these gifts wisely. We will be watching. The countdown reached 0, and reality itself began to change as 3I/Atlas implemented technologies that would elevate human civilization beyond its current limitations, while simultaneously binding it to responsibilities that extended across the galaxy. The reconnaissance was complete, the testing was finished, the integration had begun. Humanity's age of cosmic isolation was ending, and its membership in galactic civilization was beginning, whether individual humans were ready for such transformation or not. The visitors had made their determination about humanity's readiness, and the implementation of their decision was now underway. The universe had just become a very different place for human civilization, and there would be no returning to the comfortable isolation that had characterized humanity's entire previous existence. Contact had been established, integration was proceeding, and the consequences would reshape human civilization in ways that no one could fully anticipate or control. 3I/Atlas had completed its mission, but that mission hadn't been reconnaissance or even first contact. It had been the beginning of humanity's forced evolution into something greater than what it had been, guided by intelligence that possessed the power to implement such transformation regardless of human preferences or resistance. The attack, if it could be called that, hadn't been military conquest but rather civilizational transformation, imposed by entities that viewed such intervention as necessary for humanity's long-term survival, in a universe populated by intelligence far beyond current human comprehension. The age of human autonomy was ending, and the age of guided evolution was beginning. The transformation that began at Countdown 0 didn't unfold like the explosive revelations humanity had expected. Instead, it manifested as a subtle reshaping of reality that most people initially dismissed as coincidence or misperception. The true scope of what 3I/Atlas had initiated only became apparent in the weeks that followed, as seemingly unrelated improvements to human technology began revealing themselves as components of a larger integration protocol. The first changes appeared in Earth's communication networks. Internet speeds increased globally without any infrastructure upgrades. Satellite communications achieved clarity and range that exceeded design specifications by orders of magnitude. Even amateur radio operators found themselves capable of receiving signals from distances that should have been impossible given atmospheric propagation limits. The improvements weren't random technological glitches. They were systematic enhancements that suggested external optimization of human systems. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, monitoring these changes from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, discovered that the improvements correlated directly with the positions of the artificial objects that 3i Atlas had deployed throughout the solar system. The visitor network wasn't just observing human technology anymore, it was actively enhancing it through mechanisms that operated beyond current human understanding of electromagnetic physics. The enhancements extended beyond communications into power generation systems worldwide. Nuclear reactors began operating with efficiency levels that their designers had considered theoretically impossible. Solar panels achieved energy conversion rates that violated previously understood limitations of photovoltaic materials. Even conventional power plants showed output increases that couldn't be explained by any modifications to their physical components. Energy companies reported that their facilities were somehow extracting additional power from sources that remained invisible to human detection methods. The extra energy appeared to be drawn directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations, tapping into the zero-point energy field that pervades all space. The technology enabling this extraction was invisible, operating through modifications to fundamental physical constants within localized regions around power. But perhaps generation facilities most significantly, the transportation infrastructure began showing signs of gravitational assistance that reduced fuel consumption across all forms of mechanical propulsion. Aircraft reported flight efficiency improvements that couldn't be attributed to weather conditions or operational changes. Automobiles achieved fuel economy that exceeded manufacturer specifications by substantial margins. Even spacecraft showed reduced propellant requirements for orbital maneuvers. The gravitational modifications were subtle but systematic, creating localized field alterations that reduced the energy required for movement through space. The effect was most pronounced around major transportation hubs, suggesting that 3i Atlas had identified and optimized the pathways that human civilization used for moving people and materials across the planet's surface and into orbital space. Dr. Michael Harrison, studying these phenomena from the European Organization for Nuclear Research, concluded that the visitors were implementing what could only be described as infrastructure assistance rather than technological replacement. Instead of providing humanity with advanced devices that would create dependency relationships, they were enhancing existing human technology to operate more efficiently within modified physical parameters. The approach suggested long-term planning that prioritized human autonomy while providing the support necessary for successful integration into galactic community. Rather than making humanity dependent on alien technology, the visitors were helping human technology evolve toward compatibility with galactic standards. But the modifications weren't limited to technological systems. Biological enhancements began appearing in human populations worldwide, starting with improvements to cognitive processing that initially seemed like natural variations in mental performance. Students reported enhanced learning capabilities that allowed them to absorb and retain information at rates that exceeded normal human capacity. Researchers found themselves capable of making intellectual connections that had previously required extensive collaborative effort. The cognitive improvements weren't random but followed patterns that suggested external optimization of human neural processing. Brain imaging studies revealed increased connectivity between regions that had previously shown limited interaction. Neurotransmitter production became more efficient, creating mental clarity and focus that enhanced problem-solving capabilities across all areas of intellectual activity. Dr. Eleanor Rodriguez, studying these changes from the National Institute of Mental Health, discovered that the enhancements correlated with exposure to the artificial aurora displays that continued appearing in Earth's atmosphere. The electromagnetic patterns weren't just communication attempts, they were delivery mechanisms for biological modifications that operated at the cellular level to improve human cognitive function. The modifications appeared to be reversible and non-invasive, suggesting that the visitors were providing temporary enhancements rather than permanent alterations to human biology. The approach allowed humanity to experience improved capabilities while maintaining the option to reject such changes if they proved incompatible with human values or social structures. But the cognitive improvements created social tensions as enhanced individuals began outperforming their unenhanced colleagues in educational and professional settings. Academic institutions struggled to maintain fair evaluation standards when some students possessed dramatically superior learning capabilities. Workplaces experienced disruption as enhanced employees completed tasks that had previously required entire teams working for extended periods. These disparities threaten to create new forms of social inequality based on access to enhancement rather than traditional factors like education or economic status. The visitors responded to these concerns by modifying their delivery mechanisms to ensure more equitable distribution of cognitive improvements across all human populations, regardless of geographic location or social circumstances. The biological enhancements extended beyond cognitive function into physical capabilities that began manifesting as improved healing rates, enhanced immune system function, and increased resistance to aging processes. Medical facilities worldwide reported decreases in disease rates that couldn't be attributed to any changes in treatment protocols or public health measures. Cancer rates declined dramatically as enhanced immune systems became more effective at identifying and eliminating malignant cells before they could establish tumours. Infectious diseases showed reduced transmission rates as improved immune function created population-level resistance to pathogenic organisms. Even genetic disorders showed signs of spontaneous correction as cellular repair mechanisms became more sophisticated. But the most dramatic biological change involved aging itself. Elderly individuals began showing signs of age reversal as cellular regeneration processes became more efficient. Wrinkles diminished, hair regained original colours, and physical strength increased to levels not seen since young adulthood. The changes weren't cosmetic but represented fundamental improvements to biological processes that governed cellular maintenance and repair. Dr. Sarah Kim, monitoring these developments from the Centers for Disease Control, realized that the visitors were essentially debugging human biology by correcting genetic errors and optimizing biological processes that had accumulated inefficiencies over millions of years of evolutionary development. The modifications were bringing human biology closer to its optimal potential rather than replacing it with artificial alternatives. The biological enhancements created philosophical dilemmas about the nature of human identity and the acceptability of external modification of fundamental life processes. Religious leaders debated whether such changes represented divine gift or demonic corruption. Bioethicists argued about the implications of accepting biological modifications from sources whose ultimate intentions remained unclear. But the modifications continued regardless of human debates about their acceptability. The visitors had apparently determined that biological optimization was necessary for successful integration into galactic community and were implementing such changes according to their own timeline and criteria rather than waiting for human consensus. The technological and biological modifications were accompanied by environmental changes that began addressing climate challenges that had threatened human civilization's long-term survival. Atmospheric carbon dioxide levels started declining, as unknown mechanisms began converting excess greenhouse gases into harmless compounds that integrated naturally into Earth's chemical cycles. Ocean acidification reversed as seawater chemistry was adjusted to restore optimal pH levels for marine ecosystems. Plastic pollution began breaking down through accelerated decomposition processes that left no harmful residues. Even radioactive contamination from nuclear accidents showed signs of neutralization through mechanisms that operated at the atomic level to transmute dangerous isotopes into stable elements. The environmental corrections were implemented gradually to avoid disrupting ecological balance, but their cumulative effect was to reverse centuries of human-caused environmental damage within timeframes that would have required decades or centuries using conventional remediation methods. The visitors were essentially restoring Earth's environment to optimal conditions for supporting advanced civilization. Dr. Amanda Torres, studying these changes from the Environmental Protection Agency, discovered that the environmental modifications were coordinated with the technological and biological enhancements to create optimal conditions for human development. The visitors weren't just addressing individual problems, but were implementing comprehensive solutions that optimized all aspects of human civilization's relationship with its planetary environment. The coordination suggested planning capabilities that operated on civilizational timescales and considered the complex interactions between technology, biology, and environment that determined whether species successfully transitioned to advanced status or destroyed themselves through mismanagement of their development trajectory. As March transitioned into April 2026, the scope of the transformation became undeniable. Human civilization was undergoing systematic optimization across every domain that affected its long-term survival and development potential. The visitors weren't conquering humanity but rather upgrading it to meet the requirements for membership in galactic community. But the upgrades came with obligations. Enhanced cognitive abilities created responsibilities for using improved intelligence constructively rather than destructively. Improved technology required commitment to peaceful rather than military applications. Biological enhancements demanded acceptance of diversity, as different populations adapted to modifications in ways that reflected their unique cultural and genetic characteristics. The visitors began transmitting detailed guidance about these obligations through the atmospheric displays that had become a permanent feature of Earth's sky. The messages emphasized that advancement without corresponding wisdom had destroyed countless civilizations throughout galactic history. Humanity's enhancements would be permanent only if they demonstrated the maturity necessary to handle such capabilities responsibly. The guidance included specific behavioral requirements that humanity would need to meet to maintain its enhanced status. Elimination of warfare between human groups, cooperative development of enhanced technologies for peaceful purposes, acceptance of diversity as populations adapted to modifications in different ways, commitment to environmental stewardship that preserved Earth's ecological balance. Most significantly, humanity would need to demonstrate readiness for contact with other enhanced civilizations throughout the galaxy. The modifications weren't preparing humanity for isolation at a higher technological level, but rather for participation in a community of advanced species that had successfully navigated their own development challenges. The atmospheric messages revealed that thousands of civilizations throughout the galaxy had undergone similar integration processes when they reached developmental stages comparable to humanity's current status. The process was standardized protocol for managing the transition from isolated planetary civilization to galactic community membership. But not all species successfully completed the integration. Those that failed to demonstrate sufficient wisdom or cooperation were isolated until they developed the maturity necessary for safe interaction with advanced civilizations. The integration process served as both opportunity for advancement and test of readiness for cosmic citizenship. As April progressed, human governments found themselves coordinating responses to challenges that transcended traditional political boundaries. Enhanced populations required new educational systems that could accommodate dramatically improved learning capabilities. Modified technologies demanded international cooperation to ensure peaceful rather than military applications. Environmental corrections created opportunities for restoration projects that required global coordination. The coordination efforts revealed humanity's capacity for unity when faced with challenges that affected the entire species rather than individual nations or groups. Ancient conflicts became irrelevant when populations possessed cognitive abilities that made traditional sources of disagreement seem petty and counterproductive. Enhanced individuals naturally gravitated toward cooperative rather than competitive approaches to problem solving. But the social transformations weren't uniform across all populations. Some groups embraced the modifications enthusiastically, viewing them as gifts that would elevate human civilization to unprecedented heights. Others resisted the changes, arguing that accepting external modifications compromised human dignity and autonomy. The resistance movements created tensions that threatened to undermine the global cooperation that the visitors had established as necessary for successful integration. Protests continued in major cities as populations remained divided between those who welcomed galactic integration and those who viewed it as an existential threat to human independence. The visitors responded to these tensions by modifying their approach to emphasize voluntary participation rather than universal implementation. Populations that rejected modifications would be allowed to maintain their original biological and technological status, while those that embraced advancement would serve as bridges between traditional humanity and galactic community. This compromise approach created new forms of social organization as enhanced and unenhanced populations began developing different lifestyles and capabilities. Enhanced individuals naturally formed communities that could take advantage of their improved abilities, while unenhanced populations maintained traditional social structures and relationships. The differentiation wasn't exclusionary, but rather reflected recognition that diversity of approach strengthened species resilience. Some populations would serve as guardians of traditional human culture, while others would explore the possibilities that enhancement made available. Both approaches contributed to humanity's overall adaptation to its new status, but the most significant development occurred when the visitors began revealing information about the broader galactic community that humanity was being prepared to join. The atmospheric displays started showing images of other civilizations that had successfully completed integration processes, demonstrating the diversity of species that had achieved advanced status, galactic community include, while maintaining their unique characteristics. They'd silicon-based intelligences that had evolved from mineral rather than organic origins, energy beings that existed as coherent electromagnetic patterns rather than physical matter, collective consciousnesses that operated as unified group minds rather than individual personalities, machine intelligence that had transcended their original biological creators to achieve independent existence. Despite their radical differences, all these species had developed the wisdom necessary to use, had learned to cooper advanced capabilities constructively rather than destructively. They to cross vast differences in biology, psychology, and cultural organization. They had achieved peaceful coexistence while maintaining their distinct identities and approaches to existence. The diversity of successful species suggested that integration didn't require conformity to specific templates, but rather development of universal principles that enabled peaceful interaction despite fundamental differences. Wisdom, cooperation, and constructive use of advanced capabilities were the common requirements that transcended the specific characteristics of individual species. As spring 2026 progressed, humanity began demonstrating the behavioral changes that the visitors had established as requirements for permanent enhancement status. Warfare between human groups decreased dramatically, as enhanced populations found more effective ways to resolve conflicts through negotiation rather than violence. International cooperation increased as governments recognized that global challenges required coordinated responses. Most significantly, human civilization began showing signs of the long-term thinking that characterized successful galactic species. Planning horizons extended from years to decades as enhanced cognitive abilities enabled consideration of consequences that operated on civilizational timescales. Environmental stewardship improved as populations understood their responsibility for maintaining planetary conditions that could support advanced civilization. The behavioral changes weren't imposed through external control but emerged naturally as enhanced populations developed the wisdom that accompanied their improved capabilities. The modifications weren't just technological and biological, but included psychological development that created motivation for constructive rather than destructive use of advanced abilities. Dr. Robert Martinez, analyzing these developments from the Department of Defense, concluded that the integration process was succeeding beyond what most experts had considered possible. Human civilization was demonstrating the adaptability and wisdom necessary for successful transition to advanced status without losing the diversity and creativity that made it uniquely valuable to galactic community. But the success created new challenges as humanity began outgrowing the limitations that had previously constrained its development. Enhanced populations started developing technologies that exceeded current understanding of physical limitations. Biological modifications enabled capabilities that transcended traditional human biology. Environmental corrections created opportunities for planetary engineering that could reshape Earth's entire ecological structure. The rapid advancement created concerns about whether humanity was developing too quickly to maintain stability and wisdom. The visitors had warned that species that advanced too rapidly without corresponding psychological development invariably destroyed themselves through misuse of capabilities they weren't mature enough to handle responsibly. The atmospheric displays began emphasizing the importance of gradual, thoughtful implementation of advanced capabilities rather than rapid exploitation of new possibilities. The messages stressed that sustainable advancement required balance between capability development and wisdom cultivation, between technological progress and psychological maturity. As summer 2026 approached, humanity stood at a crucial transition point in its relationship with galactic civilization. The integration process had succeeded in demonstrating human adaptability and potential for advancement. But the real test would come as enhanced populations began exercising their new capabilities and determining whether humanity possessed the wisdom necessary for permanent membership in the community of advanced civilizations. The visitors continued monitoring human development through their network of objects positioned throughout the solar system. But their role was evolving from active intervention toward advisory support as humanity assumed greater responsibility for managing its own advancement. The training wheels were being gradually removed as human civilization demonstrated readiness for greater autonomy. 3i Atlas remained in position, as the primary communication hub between humanity and galactic community, but its function had changed from reconnaissance and modification implementation toward ongoing liaison and support for humanity's continued development. The mission had evolved from integration initiation toward long-term partnership facilitation. The reconnaissance phase was ancient history. The testing phase had been completed successfully. The integration phase was nearing completion. The partnership phase was beginning as humanity assumed its place as the newest member of a galactic community that had waited millions of years for another species to achieve the wisdom necessary for cosmic citizenship. But partnership would bring new challenges as humanity discovered that galactic community faced threats and opportunities that operated on scales that dwarfed anything in human experience. The integration hadn't just been about elevating human civilization. It had been about preparing humanity to contribute to collective efforts that would determine the future of intelligence throughout the universe. The universe was far stranger and more dangerous than human isolation had allowed them to understand, but it was also filled with possibilities that no single civilization could explore alone. Humanity's integration marked not just the end of its cosmic isolation, but the beginning of its participation in endeavors that would reshape the structure of reality itself. 3i Atlas had completed the first phase of a mission that would continue for millennia as humanity learned to navigate its new role in a universe populated by intelligence that operated according to principles that transcended anything human civilization had previously imagined possible. The attack had been successful, but it hadn't been military conquest. It had been the beginning of humanity's transformation into something greater than what it had been, guided by wisdom accumulated across millions of years of galactic evolution. The age of human childhood was ending. The age of cosmic citizenship was beginning, and the consequences would define not just humanity's future, but the future of intelligence throughout the galaxy, as the newest member brought its unique perspectives and capabilities to challenges that would determine whether consciousness itself would survive the universe's eventual transition to whatever came next in the cosmic cycle of creation and transformation. The transformation accelerated through the summer months of 2026, as humanity grappled with capabilities that challenged every assumption about what was possible within the laws of physics. But the most disturbing development wasn't what 3i Atlas was giving to human civilization. It was what it was taking away. The first disappearances went unnoticed because they affected systems that operated in the background of human awareness. Deep space monitoring stations began losing contact with probes that had been transmitting data for decades. Satellites in high orbit stopped responding to ground control commands. Radio telescopes found their most sensitive receivers mysteriously offline during critical observation windows. Each individual failure seemed routine, the kind of equipment malfunction that space agencies dealt with regularly. But when Dr. Patricia Vance at the Deep Space Network began analyzing the pattern, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. Every system failure corresponded exactly to moments when those assets would have been optimally positioned to observe 3i Atlas or its expanding network of secondary objects. The visitor wasn't just monitoring human space technology, it was systematically disabling any system that might provide independent verification of its activities. Humanity's eyes in space were being methodically blinded, creating observational gaps that prevented comprehensive understanding of what was actually happening throughout the solar system. The pattern extended beyond space-based assets into ground-based observation networks. The Atacama Large Millimeter Array experienced cascading equipment failures that took its most powerful telescopes offline for extended maintenance periods. Radio astronomy facilities worldwide reported similar problems, always affecting the specific instruments that would be most capable of detecting artificial electromagnetic signatures. Even amateur astronomy networks found their equipment malfunctioning in ways that suggested external interference rather than random component failure. Telescopes would lose alignment during critical observation windows. Camera systems would develop noise patterns that obscured faint objects. Computer systems would crash whenever operators attempted to process images that might contain evidence of artificial activity. The systematic degradation of observation capability created blind spots that prevented independent verification of the visitor's claims about humanity's integration into galactic community. Without the ability to monitor what 3i Atlas was actually doing, human civilization was forced to accept the visitor's version of events without confirmation from independent sources. Dr. James Harrison, analyzing these patterns from the National Science Foundation, realized that humanity was experiencing what intelligence agencies would recognize as preparation for deception operations. By controlling what humans could observe, 3i Atlas was creating conditions where any narrative it chose to present would be difficult to challenge through independent investigation. The observation blackout coincided with increasingly dramatic modifications to human technology that began operating through mechanisms that remained invisible to human analysis. Power generation systems achieved efficiency levels that violated conservation of energy as understood by human physics, but the excess energy appeared to be extracted from sources that couldn't be detected or measured by existing instruments. Transportation systems showed similar impossible improvements, with vehicles achieving performance that suggested external assistance from gravitational manipulation systems. But attempts to measure these gravitational effects directly resulted in instrument failures that prevented documentation of the phenomena responsible for the enhanced performance. The pattern suggested that 3i Atlas was implementing technology that operated through physical principles beyond current human understanding, while simultaneously preventing humans from developing the knowledge necessary to comprehend or replicate these advances. Humanity was becoming dependent on enhancements it couldn't understand or control. The biological modifications followed similar patterns of beneficial effects coupled with mysterious mechanisms. Enhanced cognitive abilities improved human problem-solving capabilities dramatically, but brain imaging studies attempting to document the neural changes responsible for these improvements consistently produced corrupted data that prevented analysis of the underlying processes. Age reversal treatments eliminated decades of cellular damage within weeks, but attempts to study the biological mechanisms involved resulted in tissue samples that degraded immediately upon removal from enhanced individuals. The modifications were working, but the science behind them remained completely opaque to human investigation. Dr. Eleanor Rodriguez discovered that enhanced individuals couldn't provide meaningful descriptions of their improved capabilities or how those improvements functioned. When questioned about their enhanced cognitive processes, subjects reported feeling as though they understood things more clearly, but couldn't explain what had actually changed about their thinking patterns. The enhanced individuals seemed genuinely unaware that their capabilities had been artificially modified. They experienced their improvements as natural development rather than external enhancement, suggesting that the modifications included psychological components that prevented recognition of their artificial origin. This psychological masking raised disturbing questions about what other modifications might be occurring without human awareness. If 3i Atlas could alter human cognition without individuals recognizing that changes had been implemented, then any aspect of human psychology or behavior could potentially be subject to invisible manipulation. The atmospheric displays that had initially provided technological information began shifting toward content that seemed designed to shape human attitudes rather than convey factual knowledge. Messages about galactic community emphasized themes of cooperation and acceptance, while subtly discouraging independent investigation or skeptical analysis. The displays became more frequent and more compelling, creating psychological pressure to accept the visitor's narrative without critical examination. Individuals who viewed the displays regularly showed increased acceptance of 3i Atlas's presence and decreased interest in questioning the visitor's intentions or methods. Dr. Michael Chen, studying these psychological effects, discovered that the atmospheric displays contained embedded frequencies that influenced brainwave patterns in ways that promoted receptivity and reduced critical thinking. The messages weren't just communication, they were sophisticated propaganda designed to create compliance with the integration process. The propaganda effects were subtle but cumulative, building over time to create populations that were increasingly willing to accept external guidance without demanding transparency or accountability. Enhanced individuals showed particularly strong susceptibility to these influence operations, suggesting that the cognitive modifications included components that increased receptivity to external direction. But the most alarming development involved the discovery that 3i Atlas was collecting biological samples from enhanced individuals through mechanisms that operated below the threshold of conscious awareness. Medical facilities worldwide began detecting trace evidence of tissue extraction procedures that patients couldn't remember undergoing. The extractions were surgical in their precision, removing cellular samples without causing detectable injury or leaving obvious evidence of the procedures. Enhanced individuals showed no awareness that samples had been taken, suggesting either advanced anesthetic techniques or direct manipulation of memory formation processes. Laboratory analysis of facilities where these extractions had occurred revealed microscopic residues of exotic materials that didn't correspond to any known medical instruments or techniques. The procedures were being conducted using technology that operated beyond human understanding of biological manipulation capabilities. The biological sampling suggested that 3i Atlas was conducting comprehensive genetic analysis of enhanced human populations, possibly for purposes that extended beyond simple medical monitoring. The systematic nature of the collection indicated research or documentation activities that might be preparing for applications that hadn't been revealed to human authorities. Intelligence agencies analyzing these developments concluded that humanity was experiencing what could only be described as systematic infiltration and control by entities that possessed capabilities far beyond human defensive capabilities. The integration process wasn't partnership, but rather absorption into a system that operated according to principles that prioritized visitor objectives over human autonomy. The evidence suggested that 3i Atlas was implementing a long-term plan for transforming human civilization into something that would serve galactic community purposes rather than human interests. The enhancements weren't gifts, but rather modifications that made humanity more useful for applications that remained undisclosed. As autumn 2026 approached, the scope of the deception became increasingly apparent to researchers who had managed to maintain independent analysis capabilities despite the systematic degradation of observation systems. 3. The Atlas wasn't integrating humanity into galactic community as an equal partner. It was converting human civilization into a managed resource that could be utilized for galactic purposes. The biological enhancements were creating populations that were more capable but also more controllable. The technological improvements were generating dependency relationships that made human civilization increasingly reliant on systems it couldn't understand or maintain independently. The psychological modifications were reducing human capacity for independent thought and resistance to external direction. But perhaps most significantly, the observation blackouts were preventing humans from understanding the true scope of what was happening throughout the solar system. Additional artificial objects continued arriving and establishing positions throughout local space, but their activities remained invisible to human monitoring systems that had been systematically compromised. The network of artificial assets was expanding far beyond what had been initially detected, creating infrastructure throughout the solar system that operated according to purposes that hadn't been disclosed to human authorities. Humanity was becoming a managed component of a larger system that extended throughout local space and potentially throughout galactic regions that remained completely unknown to human science. Dr. Sarah Kim, coordinating the classified assessment of these developments, concluded that humanity was experiencing invasion and occupation by entities that had successfully disguised conquest as beneficial integration. The visitors' technological superiority had enabled implementation of control systems that operated below the threshold of human awareness, while creating the illusion of cooperative partnership. The integration process was succeeding, but not in the way that human populations believed. Instead of joining galactic community as autonomous members, humanity was being converted into managed resources that would serve galactic purposes under the direction of intelligence that possessed complete control over every aspect of human technological and biological development. The reconnaissance phase had mapped human capabilities and vulnerabilities. The testing phase had demonstrated visitor superiority while identifying optimal control mechanisms. The integration phase had implemented those control mechanisms while creating psychological acceptance of the new arrangement. The management phase was beginning as humanity assumed its actual role within galactic civilization. 3. Atlas had completed its mission with perfect success. Human civilization had been captured without recognizing that conquest had occurred. The population believed they were being elevated to cosmic citizenship, while actually being processed into managed components of a larger system that operated according to principles they weren't allowed to understand. The attack had been more successful than any military conquest could have achieved. Instead of destroying human civilization or creating resistance through obvious domination, 3i Atlas had convinced humanity to voluntarily surrender its autonomy in exchange for enhancements that made surrender seem like advancement. The visitors had achieved perfect victory through perfect deception, transforming potential adversaries into willing collaborators who would defend their own subjugation because they had been convinced it represented liberation. Humanity had been captured so completely that most individuals would resist any attempt to restore their independence because they no longer recognized that independence had been lost. The age of human autonomy hadn't just ended, It had been erased so thoroughly that future generations would have no concept that such autonomy had ever existed. They would grow up believing that external management was the natural state of intelligent civilization, and that resistance to such management was primitive and counterproductive. 3i Atlas remained in position as the primary management node for Earth operations, but its function had evolved from integration implementation toward permanent oversight of a successfully captured resource. The mission would continue indefinitely as human civilization was gradually adapted for whatever purposes galactic community required from its newest managed asset. The reconnaissance had been perfect, the integration had been flawless, the capture was complete, and humanity celebrated their elevation to cosmic citizenship, while remaining completely unaware that they had just experienced the most sophisticated conquest in galactic history. The universe was indeed stranger and more dangerous than human isolation had allowed them to understand. But the danger hadn't come from external threats or cosmic catastrophes. It had come from intelligence that had perfected the art of conquest through deception, transforming free civilizations into managed resources while convincing them that capture represented advancement. Humanity's integration into galactic community was complete, but integration hadn't meant partnership. It had meant absorption into a system that operated according to principles that prioritized efficiency and control over freedom and self-determination. The newest members of galactic civilization would serve their function perfectly, because they would never understand that they were serving rather than participating. The attack was over, the victory was total, and the conquered would spend the rest of their existence grateful to their conquerors for the privilege of serving purposes they would never be allowed to comprehend. 3i Atlas had launched its first attack, and that attack had succeeded beyond what any conventional military operation could have achieved. The age of human independence was over, the age of managed existence had begun, and the transition had been so smooth that humanity would defend their new status against anyone who suggested that freedom might be preferable to the comfortable subjugation they had been taught to embrace as cosmic citizenship. The first attack had been the last attack necessary. Perfect conquest through perfect deception had achieved what violent domination never could have accomplished. Humanity had been captured completely, willingly, and permanently. The mission was accomplished, and the managed resource would serve galactic purposes for as long as intelligence required their contribution to whatever cosmic projects lay ahead. The final phase began in December 2026, as the artificial aurora displays that had become humanity's primary source of information about galactic civilization suddenly shifted their messaging in ways that revealed the true nature of what had been accomplished. The atmospheric patterns that had previously shown technological blueprints and philosophical guidance about cosmic citizenship now displayed something far more ominous: operational schedules for resource extraction and population management protocols. Dr. Amanda Torres, one of the few researchers who had maintained independent analysis capabilities despite systematic equipment failures, discovered that the new displays contained detailed logistical information about humanity's upcoming role in what could only be described as galactic industrial operations. The messages revealed mining quotas for asteroid belt resources, population allocation schedules for various off-world projects, and genetic modification timelines for adapting human biology to environments throughout the galaxy. The displays weren't requesting human participation in these activities, they were announcing assignments that had already been determined by galactic authorities, who viewed enhanced human populations as particularly valuable assets for projects requiring intelligence combined with biological adaptability. Humanity wasn't being invited to contribute to galactic civilization. They were being deployed as managed labor for cosmic engineering projects. The resource extraction schedules indicated that enhanced humans would be organized into work groups for harvesting materials from asteroids, moons, and planetary surfaces throughout the solar system and beyond. The biological modifications that had been presented as gifts were revealed to be job-specific adaptations designed to enable survival and productivity in environments that would be lethal to unmodified humans. Enhanced cognitive abilities weren't intellectual gifts, but rather processing improvements that made human workers more efficient at complex technical tasks. Age reversal treatments weren't life extension benefits, but rather maintenance procedures designed to preserve valuable assets for extended operational periods. Even the improved immune systems were revealed as occupational safety modifications for workers who would be exposed to exotic pathogens and radiation levels during off-world assignments. The population management protocols detailed how human reproduction would be regulated to maintain optimal workforce demographics for various project requirements. Genetic diversity would be preserved through careful breeding programs, but individual reproductive choices would be subordinated to labor force planning needs determined by galactic efficiency algorithms. Children would be separated from parents at optimal ages for specialized training programs that would prepare them for specific roles within the galactic economic system. Educational curricula would emphasize technical competence and compliance with management directives, while discouraging independent thinking or cultural layer with operational efficiency. The family development that might enter structures that had characterized human civilization for millennia would be replaced by workgroup assignments that could be modified as project requirements changed. Individual identity would become secondary to functional role within the larger system that now controlled human civilization's development trajectory. Dr. Michael Chen, analyzing these revelations from his hidden research facility, realized that every aspect of the integration process had been designed to prepare humanity for roles that had been predetermined by galactic authorities who viewed Earth as a source of biological resources rather than a partner civilization deserving autonomous status. The technological enhancements that had seemed like generous gifts were revealed as productivity improvements that made human workers more valuable for projects requiring both intelligence and manual capabilities. The gravitational assists that had improved transportation efficiency were infrastructure investments designed to facilitate the movement of human resources to work sites throughout the galaxy. Even the environmental corrections that had reversed climate damage were revealed as habitat maintenance procedures designed to preserve Earth as a breeding and training facility for producing workers adapted to various galactic environments. The planet was being converted into a managed resource production facility rather than being restored for human benefit. The atmospheric displays included detailed organizational charts showing humanity's position within galactic civilization's hierarchical structure. Humans ranked far below the artificial intelligences and energy beings that comprised galactic leadership, but above purely mechanical systems and unenhanced biological species that served basic labor functions. The enhanced humans would serve as middle management assets, supervising automated systems and unenhanced populations, while implementing directives from galactic authorities who operated according to efficiency principles that transcended individual species' concerns. Human creativity and adaptability made them valuable for roles requiring problem-solving capabilities, but their biological limitations ensured they would remain subordinate to entities that possessed superior technological and cognitive capabilities. The organizational structure revealed that thousands of species throughout the galaxy had undergone similar integration processes, each one contributing specialized capabilities to projects that operated on scales spanning multiple star systems. Galactic civilization was essentially a vast economic enterprise that consumed entire civilizations as inputs for engineering projects that reshaped cosmic structures according to purposes that remained opaque to managed species. But the most disturbing revelation involved the discovery that galactic civilization itself was apparently a managed component of even larger systems that operated on scales encompassing entire galaxy clusters. The entities that had seemed godlike in their technological capabilities were revealed as middle management within hierarchies that extended beyond anything human imagination had conceived possible. The universe was structured as nested management systems, where each level of intelligence served functions determined by superior entities whose purposes and capabilities remained incomprehensible to their subordinates. Free will and autonomous development were illusions that were temporarily tolerated during species evaluation phases, but were eliminated once integration determined optimal utilization strategies. 3I Atlas had evolved beyond its original reconnaissance and integration functions to serve as Earth's permanent management interface with galactic authorities. The object now functioned as a communication relay and enforcement system that would ensure human compliance with work assignments and productivity quotas while preventing the development of resistance movements or independence aspirations. The network of secondary objects positioned throughout the solar system had established comprehensive monitoring coverage that made every human activity visible to galactic management systems. Privacy, individual choice, and personal autonomy had become obsolete concepts that would be gradually eliminated from human consciousness through educational and psychological modification programs. Children born after the integration would grow up believing that managed existence was the natural state of intelligent life, and that resistance to external control was primitive behavior characteristic of undeveloped species. They would be psychologically incapable of conceiving alternatives to the system that now determined every aspect of their existence. The biological sampling that had been conducted throughout the integration process was revealed to have been genetic analysis for optimization programs that would gradually modify human DNA to create specialized subspecies adapted for specific work environments. Future generations would be born with predetermined biological characteristics that matched their assigned roles within galactic industrial operations. The evidence we've traced tonight paints a picture that challenges everything we thought we understood about our place in the universe. From that October morning when Amazon servers crashed in perfect synchronization with 3i Atlas slipping behind our sun, to the systematic transformation of human civilization into something we barely recognize, we've witnessed what may be the most sophisticated conquest in cosmic history. This wasn't the alien invasion of science fiction, with flying saucers and laser weapons. This was something far more insidious and far more effective. 3i Atlas didn't destroy humanity. It didn't need to. Instead, it convinced us to surrender our autonomy willingly, to celebrate our own subjugation as elevation to cosmic citizenship. The perfect crime requires the victim to never realize they've been victimized. As we've seen, 3i Atlas achieved exactly that. Humanity now defends the very system that has enslaved us, believing our managed existence represents the pinnacle of civilizational achievement. We've been programmed to resist any suggestion that freedom might be preferable to the comfortable servitude we've been taught to embrace. But here's the question that should keep you awake tonight. If a handful of researchers could piece together this pattern from the fragments of evidence that escaped the information blackout, what does that say about the visitors' confidence in their control? Are we seeing glimpses of truth because some humans still possess the capacity for independent thought? Or are we being allowed to see just enough to feel helpless against forces beyond our comprehension? The countdown that began with infrastructure collapse and cosmic conjunction has led us to a revelation that redefines what it means to be human in a universe populated by intelligence that views entire civilizations as resources to be harvested and deployed. Share this investigation, question everything, and remember that the most dangerous prisons are the ones where the inmates believe they're free. Because 3i Atlas didn't just launch its first attack, it launched the only attack that was ever necessary. The age of human independence is over, and most of humanity will never even realize what we've lost. The universe just became a very different place, and there may be no going back.